Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Give a pedigree cat in good hands. Age 9 years Angora, accustomed to the litter box, sterilized, eats dry food premium. Call. Monica shuddered, so struck by the photo of a white cat, which looked from the phone screen with the eyes of her favorite. The cat Pushak, with whom the girl was inseparable since childhood, had recently died, and the cat in the picture was incredibly similar to him. The girl read the ad again, then looked at the image of the cat, thought, and dialed the number. Hello. I'm calling about your cat. I'd love to see her. You see, she looks just like my dead cat. You'd think my Pusk had been cloned. Hello, and you can come visit us anytime. The woman on the other end had a nice, low voice. I think you'll like my Marquise. She's very smart. Monica noticed that the woman seemed sad or tired. It turned out to be a short drive, just halfway to Monica's work. They agreed on a time to meet. Monica didn't want to put the matter off and drove to the specified address right after work the very next day. A strange excitement swept over her, as if meeting someone else's cat was something special and decisive. When she found the right entrance, she stood for a minute, took a deep breath, and resolutely went inside. There was a tiny rug by the door of the right apartment. It was clean. She pressed the bell. A very thin woman of small stature opened the door. Good evening. It's me, Monica. Remember from the ad? Yes, of course. Come in, please. Inviting the guest in, the woman walked forward. Monica noted that her gait was not stiff, as a completely exhausted person, through the darkish corridor, went into the room. In a small apartment of the old type, there was hospital sterility and emptiness. No furniture, no appliances, no clothes hung on the chairs or scattered, no personal knickknacks or those not too necessary things which give the dwelling coziness. Even the curtains on the windows looked poor and temporary, of some cheap and frivolous matter. The house would not have been habitable if the lady in the white kerchief had not seated herself opposite Monica on a small sofa, making an inviting gesture. Monica looked at her, not without embarrassment. She looked haggard, her bloodless face like an icon. Make yourselves comfortable, the woman said in the meantime. Aye, Ashley, and here is our Marquise. She led with her hand, but Monica, at the entrance already, saw this incredible picture. The large white cat was sitting on the only chair by the couch where the hostess and Monica sat. She looked like a majestic statue. The emptiness around it especially enhanced the impression. The cat stared at the girl, studying her at first, and then shifted her gaze to the woman in the headscarf, as if demanding an explanation from her. Monica, too, was scrutinizing Marquise. Hello, Marquise, she said quietly. You are very beautiful. Tears came to her eyes, and the girl was silent. Ashley nodded understandingly. Pulling herself together, Monica turned to her. Are you leaving, or? If. She smiled sadly. I guess you could call it that. She paused for a moment. It was obvious that the explanation was not easy for her. I love her very much, but Ashley slowly pulled the kerchief off her head, revealing a perfectly smooth skull. Oncology, the last course of chemotherapy, was a waste. There's no point in surgery. I've got 6 months to live. Monica, stunned into silence. That's why her voice was so impassive, her face so pale. That's what the scarf was hiding. What can I say? You know, I've gotten used to the idea. Ashley went on. It's true that one gets used to everything. At first, the news is like a lightning strike, and then you have to get on with your life. You can't go to the coffin alive. She grinned bitterly. The two women, From the first words felt sympathy for each other and continued to talk about some unimportant things, trifles. Strangers, it would seem, had nothing in common, but two lonely people needed warm companionship, and the Marquesa, meanwhile, jumped down from her chair and approached them, rubbed herself against Ashley's legs, then raised her face to Monica's and meowed. "You two are going to be friends." Ashley predicted and smiled. "But you know, Monica, it's complicated. I think you'll understand. I have a scheduled hospitalization coming up, and I'd like to keep Marquise with me for 2 weeks. Would that be okay? And you'll come over after work. You'll get used to each other." "Of course I don't mind. Let her stay, of course." Monica said goodbye warmly and left to visit her new acquaintance and her cat during the agreed time. She was anxious, but at the same time somehow lighter after this meeting. This evening filled her with memories. With all her heart, she sympathized with Ashley. She involuntarily compared her own fate with another's and thought of loneliness. The girl realized that attachment to the animal is not a whim of a sick person. Her cat Pushok, who had literally grown up with her, became quite infirm in his old age. Coming in the evening from the realtor's office, where she worked as a lawyer on the registration of transactions, Monica, with sadness gazed into his sad eyes, watched the almost human, clumsy movements of his paws, which so wanted to call Gowdy. Even Pushka's meow began to resemble a senile rattling voice, and no vitamins could help him. The veterinarian, to whom Monica took the pet in despair, only sighed sympathetically and suggested, "Well, my dear, your cat is still long-lived. I am not God, and give him a second life cannot, but to ease his suffering can be." He glanced at Monica, whose eyes came to involuntary tears. "It'll be easier for you too. 1 injection and the patient will go into a soft, eternal sleep. Believe me, it's the best thing we can do for him." Monica refused, went home with Fluffy. The two of them stoically endured the difficult months, without words understanding each other. The cat lay without strength, did not want to eat, only his gaze was understanding or forgiving. The girl cried, turning away. She was sure that Fluff would feel her despair if she showed him her tears, and one evening, when the mistress returned home, she found her furry companion had already calmed down for good, as if he had tried to ease his mistress's suffering. Monica spared no effort or time to take the pet's body, which had lost its soft pliability, to a distant abandoned dacha to bury it near her favorite lilac bushes, where once upon a time they had spent many happy hours together as a family. She was left all alone. The girl was returning from the half-destroyed fence of the old dacha, limping a little and talking to herself. "Well, now there is no one to talk to, we have to do something, we have to live somehow. Who's a cat and who's a best friend? It's not my fault that I'm alone. I have to live." So talking to herself, she reached the entrance where the train stopped, under the clatter of wheels and conversations, looked out the dirty window and decided to take the cat. In the province, a lonely person is immediately visible. Neighbors know almost everything about him, everyone in sight. The fate of a loner in a big city is unenviable, especially if the character of the person is peculiar. Monica was a kind and intelligent girl, but childhood trauma left her a slight, almost imperceptible limp on one leg, and this complex she has not been able to cope with. In her distant youth as a romantic young lady, she had the misfortune to fall in love with a kid from the neighbor's yard, Jack. Black-haired and swarthy, he resembled a gypsy. He had incredible charm. Nowadays they'd call it charisma. He was a gambler and a desperate soccer player. A couple of yard games were still going on, and Monica could watch the boys, pretending she was interested in the game and not in any of the players. Girlfriends and little kids were squealing and yelling. Monica was in this crowd of fans too, and caught every move Jack made. His swarthy body soared in a run, the boy's supple torso aroused admiration. Jack was always surrounded by a crowd of younger kids. It was their idol. Without knowing Jack's character or habits, Monica fell in love simply with his appearance, so lively, full of vitality, boyish face with dark eyebrows, was thin and spiritualized in moments of play or lively conversation. Monica wanted to look at him and simply admire him. She stood at the window overlooking Jack's driveway for long periods of time, trying to track his exit and jump out, as if she were going to the neighborhood department store for groceries, just as Jack approached her house. Apparently, she was getting in the kids' way too often. At 13, girls don't have a sense of proportion, so what can you do? "Hey, you limp," he called out to her one day. "What's your name?" Monica felt as if she had been doused with ice water the moment when the boy she adored noticed her. But how? All he noticed was her limp. She then immediately ran home and did not even cry, only stopped looking in Jack's direction. After that, the girl ran through the yard as soon as possible. If there was a soccer game. More Monica never once allowed herself to think about men. Complexes received in adolescence often remain in a person for life. At her parents, the girl was a late child, and they looked at her as a child, not really delving into her mental space. Her childhood crush and remained unnoticed by anyone, and brought up on books, Monica closed herself in a cozy corridor of music, novels, household chores near her mother. "Daughter, don't you want to go to the movies?" her mother Margaret asked her. "The girls at the box office told me that a new movie is on, and people are pouring in." Being aware of the news from her young colleagues, the old lady began to worry that her daughter was always alone. She felt somewhat guilty for the incident when Monica had fallen off her bike and injured her leg. Although Margaret and her husband had then done everything possible for their daughter, the mother's heart ached. Of course, the blame for the aftermath fell entirely on the doctors, who, after surgery and treatment, sent them home, saying it would all go away with time. Elaborate. See, sun and good nutrition will help. Elderly spouses took their daughter to the sea, as they lived frugally and could splurge for the sake of her health, and nutrition was out of the question. All the best, Monica. In general, Monica was the one unique flower in the family garden. Margaret herself got married quite late. The daughter who had been stuck in girls was persuaded by her parents to marry their good, modest accountant, who had taken care of her sick mother until the age of 40 and remained single. The new family took shape. The spouses were completely satisfied with each other. The birth of a daughter was a happiness unexpected and almost unreal. That's why Monica was unconditionally adored by her father. Well, Margaret even allowed herself to dream of grandchildren. Having successfully graduated from the law faculty of the local university, Monica began to work, changed several places. She took root, oddly enough, in a noisy and crowded real estate company, helping employees and clients in drafting documents and guiding them through the authorities. The screaming girls, the young boys who ran through the office, were comrades at work, but nothing more. Monica was like from the last century, big gray eyes, dark wavy hair, and a tall, slender figure. But the main thing, of course, was in her smooth movements and manner of holding herself, as if she had just stepped out of a picture of the life of counts and countesses. So her cold restraint kept her from getting too close. She was always on a first-name basis with people. At arm's length, the life of the family flowed peacefully and softly. Parents very quickly after each other went into the next world. very modest, inconspicuous people who bore their duties all their lives as they should, and when they grew old, they passed away one by one, as if they were bound together. So Monica stayed with Pushka and lived quietly, not suffering from the absence of relatives and friends. After all, there was a kind friend who had given her his warmth and affection since her early childhood. Now she had a new relationship ahead of her. Monica stopped by Ashley's house a day or two later. "Hello, Ashley. It's Monica. Can I come by again tonight?" She called before she left her office. She was always happy to see a new acquaintance, treating her to tea from her meager supply. Monica, seeing the embarrassment of her new friend, brought her a little something so as not to embarrass her. She was an excellent worker and earned quite well for her position. Deals were made a lot, despite the crises and cataclysms that abounded in the last 10 years, and a good lawyer, both clients and realtors appreciated. But each time the guest became convinced that Ashley ate like a bird, and most often she had no appetite at all. The only food she accepted with joy was food for her favorite cat. Here Monica did not skimp on the most, what is to say, premium. Oh, perfect timing. Just sprinkling the last of it on her. Ashley's eyes lit up at the sight of the bag for Marquise. The woman looked away immediately, embarrassed by her poverty and not admitting it. Marquise will have to get used to me. Maybe she'll realize that I'm not unhealthy and accept food from me. Monica explained her in, smiling at Ashley. She didn't want to embarrass the sick one. "And where did you get such a gorgeous cat?" she asked. Ashley smiled weakly. It was obvious that the memory pleased her. "Oh, that's a very interesting story," she said. Funny and sad at the same time. Then she was silent, reconstructing the details of that long-ago day. "There was always music in our house. My parents were different. Sometimes they had fun, and sometimes my mother liked to cry, even cry, finding some far-fetched reasons. Mom had no reason to cry, I assure you, Monica. Papa idolized her, but Mama, she was a real Carmen, hot and passionate, and terribly, terribly jealous. My parents loved going to the theater and were regulars at Philharmonic concerts, and Dad once had the misfortune to praise one of our local singers. She sang the lead parts, had a beautiful voice. Her name was Lauren. Mama, of course, did not fail to show her temper. She made a scandal. Well, only at home, my sister Clara and I laughed. But Daddy wasn't laughing. So Mom asserted herself, you see. It may have looked silly from the outside, but Mommy knew what she was doing. Our intelligent, soft Daddy was also asserting his own importance. How could he? Such a beautiful wife, jealous of him, and to whom, prima opera stage, it means that he is worth it. It means that he is a real man. My God, how touching they were in their funny quarrels. And how did they make up afterwards? Dad would bring a huge bouquet, Mom would play the perfect hostess, which she never was, and cook exclusively to Dad's order. Ashley's bloodless face lit up as she told the story, became alive. It felt as if she had forgotten herself and distracted herself from her painful condition. Memories of loved ones gave her strength, but it was difficult to breathe. The woman took breaks to take a break from the emotional narrative. And then Mom went quite far in her marital zeal, wanting to prove that she was ready for everything for the sake of Dad, suddenly offered to go to the singer and present her with a bouquet. Dad was confused, but could not contradict Mom. It's great for the family and the kids. Daddy's never, ever been inferior to anyone. In work, in friendship, and in his love for Mom, he was faithful, acted only according to his beliefs and principles. And here they are, Mom, with an important look, Dad with a gorgeous bouquet, Go after the play and the restroom actress, and there is no one, not a single admirer at the door. Not one, not even the most pathetic bouquet under the door. The actress, in whose honor just exploded with applause hall, sat in a corner alone, holding a cute little white kitty in her lap and wiped her tears. It turned out that the other day Lauren leaves to her husband in Israel, planned her benefit, but the wife of the chief director, talentless and envious, did not want Lauren to receive a farewell ovation. She secretly warned the entire staff of the theater, who bribed, who simply frightened of dismissal, and the servants simply put the intended prima, bouquets and baskets in the backyard. Not only that, schemer, hoping, after the departure of Lauren to get her role, intrigues to achieve the cancellation of the benefit. The actress, having told about this completely alien to her people, burst into tears on the shoulder of our mother. "Lauren, my God, how is she? How are you? You are a golden voice, my dear." Mommy hugged Lauren and sobbed with her. Daddy did not know how to calm this couple drowning in tears, but called someone from the closet and asked to bring champagne from the cupboard. When the parents returned home at midnight, having dropped off Mom's best friend, the singer Lauren, there was a little white cat in Mom's arms. Lauren left her living mascot to her new soulful friend. That's how we got Marquise. Mommy, with her inherent passion, was eager to fight, and this time was supported by both Daddy and us. She arranged a grandiose scandal in the theater, disgraced the mean wife of the chief for the whole city, but it was too late. Lauren left without revenge. And we're so fond of the cat. See how she's turned out. It's like a Marquise. Now she reminds us of 3 good people, Lauren, who also recently passed away, and my parents. That's why I love and cherish her so much. Ashley was tired. You could see it in her heaving chest and intermittent breathing, but her eyes were bright and her lips were smiling. It was the first time Monica had seen her so lively, almost cheerful, and she was glad of it. I can't give her the care I used to give her. Ashley repented. You see, Monica, there's nothing left. While I still had strength, I sold everything I had. I want to leave behind a vacant apartment so I don't have to go to the trouble of selling it. You have to face the truth. You're a very strong person, Ashley, said Monica, lowering her eyes. Very decent. That's the whole story of our family, said Ashley. The family was gone, and the story was over. Her pale lips even slightly parted into a semblance of a smile. And my life will soon be over. I'd like to end it in some beautiful way, but I can't think of anything, and I don't have the strength, let alone the means. Eric wanted to leave William money. He was worried that the apartment had become so empty, but my boy, he's a good boy, he didn't take it. He's too honest, he's a spineless man, like everyone in our family, but I'm glad that at least my apartment will be left to my nephew. He'll sell it anyway, expand the housing in his town, I guess. It's the least I can do to thank him. Pure soul, how does he take care of me? He's been the only one who's kept me going these last few years. Isn't he going to move in with you? Monica asked. He is still working after graduation, and to live with a sick aunt is not the greatest happiness. I'm even glad he won't have time to do it. The things and the apartment are not the main thing, but I was so afraid for Marquesa. I love her more than anything in the world. This cat is the only thing dear to me. Marquise has been with me through the whole illness. Can you imagine? She calmed me down, lay down next to me on the sore spot, and after chemo, when I literally turned inside out, guarded me near the bathroom door. She calmed down only when I crawled out of there exhausted and got to bed, and from the hospital waiting for me. Now I will be calm for my beauty. You will not hurt her. The cat looked attentively at the 2 women and calmly lay in its usual place, as if it fully understood their conversation and sympathized with them. It smelled cozy and warm. Monica began to approach the cat more and more often, who was already allowing herself to be stroked by the stranger. When people have little time to socialize and all the deadlines are shortened, they bond much faster than in normal life. Ashley was in a hurry. She wanted to talk to Monica, to tell her about her own. The young girl proved to be a soulful and attentive listener. Gradually, she came to know Ashley's story in full. Young Ashley came to this city to study. She lived with her older sister and brother-in-law, who were already well settled here, working and raising a cute little son. Ashley adored her nephew's baby, and he reciprocated, but no matter what they said, it was shameful to sit on each other's heads in the small apartment of young married couples with a small child. 6 months later, Ashley moved into a student dormitory. "Why are you leaving?" Her sister Clara, as thin and white as Ashley, was indignant. "I'm home. Soup is hot any time, study. There's your balcony, please. Brian, you tell her." She addressed her equally young, curly-haired husband. He was fully immersed in his favorite job, not much at home, of course. A teacher at a technical high school, this is not even a school teacher. He was required to immerse himself in 2 areas at once: the education of children and the organization of scientific work and practice with them. Brian came tired and did not really get into the household chores, but the recovery of the body needed, and he conscientiously, admittedly, would be happy to visit his favorite wife in the marital bed more often. And secretly he was looking forward to his sister-in-law's move, too, for she was young. "Stay, Ashley." The young husband pulled, but not too convincingly. "I did, and I didn't regret it at all. If you haven't lived in a college town, you're not a student." The girl from the province had an easy disposition, was successful in her studies, but most of all, she was attracted by the tourism section, where there were many strong and as cheerful as herself, guys and girls, especially the guys. One of them caught her eye. Tall, a head taller than Ashley herself, a powerful blonde. Eric seemed an odd name, but it didn't fit the stately fellow, with big hands, obviously familiar with a shovel, a paddle, or even a hunting rifle. And how is he, in general, studying normally? Ashley quietly asked his classmates, like everyone else. They answered her. He's a good student, of course, because of his diligence and effort, but sometimes he'll come up with an idea. Last week, he suggested replacing one tricky thing and the apparatus the most simple. And it worked like a charm. Can you imagine? Even our professor wondered how he didn't think of it himself. And indeed, Eric gave a suggestion that I wanted to try and practice. Technical university, but even here such bright heads are not often found, and in the Students' Trial Design Bureau, the backbone of the same thorough, thoughtful guys was gathered. No one was surprised when later they stayed together and set up the production of running household appliances. During camping trips, Eric often found himself next to Ashley, or maybe it was she who inadvertently fell into his arms. He's so big and handsome, seemed strong and dependable. In fact, he was. No, that's not how you fasten it. He stopped the newcomer and went to fix a peg under the tent. Have you ever tried it like this? He took a knife from his buddy and showed him how to split, with small shavings, the saved dry wood in order to quickly light a fire. And when, with one sharp movement, he set Ashley's dislocated leg on the mountain path, he became a god to her. She lay awake all night, grateful, remembering the warmth of his hands on her ankle and imagining his wavy hair in front of her. Her leg ached, but the curls of it she could still make out. It must be true what they say about the rescued becoming special to the one who rescued him. And so it was with Ashley. He was now noticing her everywhere. "Hey, squirrel!" he shouted to her from afar. "It's a tough route today. Bandage your leg, you hear?" "Well, squirrel? Is it an axe porridge today?" He teased her when it was her turn to cook. So gradually, unnoticed, he got closer and closer. She mollycoddled and did not believe the happiness, but did not show it. By the end of the trip, the comrades, who noticed their not quite usual affection for each other, began to shout to both of them. "Hey, squirrels!" It was exactly affection, because they walked together, as tied to each other, and two bright heads always flashed near each other. "When will you call me to the wedding?" The sacramental question was finally asked to them at the end of the hike. "What wedding?" Ashley blushed. "We will call you there when you get together. Order a cafe and we will call you there." Eric joked. There was no wedding. What kind of wedding for students? But they registered the marriage, drank champagne, sang to the guitar, had fun. Soon Eric graduated from the institute, and a year later Ashley defended herself. They got their diplomas, rented a place, and started the same modest, as in student life, joint life. Instead of couples at the institute, they worked in their cooperative, as it was then called, a private enterprise, no matter how big or small. Eric turned out to be not such a strong technical genius as it seemed in his student years, but he gained such good friends, got to know such guys who could do incredible things in a couple of days. His decency and responsibility impressed almost everyone who knew him. And when he started his own business, many of the old guard were willing to cooperate. It was their time, precisely the moment when the country began to destroy industrial production. The adventurism of youth, the idea that united friends, the fervor and ardor, not wasted strength, moved them. How brave are young people who do not assume failures and failures. This ignorance allows them to act without regard to authority. "Listen, old man, we're in the middle of something. You better run up. No one can solve it but you understand. It's a matter of honor, old man." And the old man drove, walked, called back, although Eric promised him nothing, did not lure him with anything. He was just a man of business and talents, flocked to this very business like butterflies to the light. Everyone wanted to do something real, to sweat, to give their best, to be interesting. So that steam would come out of their ears, and then a sigh of relief would come out of their chests. "That's it. We found it. We did it." "Eric?" Ashley told him. "What did you do to lure the professor? After all, he is a talent. He will win the Nobel Prize if he gathers his inventions in a pile and shows them, and you keep him in a smoky booth where there is nothing to breathe, not to think about. My little squirrel, you don't know anything about sausage trimmings." Eric hummed, grabbing his little wife by the shoulders and putting her in front of him. "He didn't come to the office. He came to us, understand? Well, you do what you want, but people shouldn't work in these conditions." Ashley spoke. "Let's calculate how much we need for new windows, furniture, again to renew. The computers are state of the art, but they're on shabby, almost dumpy desks. Come on, I'll order it tomorrow, sign here." Eric, scratching his thick hair, sighed and signed, sometimes with a groan. What a dump, Ashley, for God's sake. They're college desks. Your brother-in-law wrote them off. At least don't say that to him. My sister's husband had been headmaster of a vocational college for many years, and he'd helped his brother-in-law with the written and scribbled desks. How could one resist the charm of kinship? The two families lived amicably, meeting on holidays at the dinner table, but not so long ago Clara and Brian moved to a neighboring town where their son studied at the institute. Ashley, though she was not an accountant by specialty, from the first days was engaged in the payroll of employees and other small matters to which Eric could not reach his hands. A woman's eyes saw the world differently, and sometimes her wife could see things and poke Eric in the nose, in his short-sightedness, that he marveled. "Really, Ashley? I wouldn't have realized." Years went by, then flew, and they were the same loving squirrels, head to head, solving life's questions. On vacation, the spouses in the old memory went on hikes, mastering the most different, the most difficult routes. Once they had to interrupt the trip at the most unexpected moment. The son-in-law had a heart attack. He died overnight. Nephew was only in his first year. No comrades, no life experience. Sister in a new city has not had time to recognize anyone. In addition, in a terrible grief, confused. The funeral arrangements fell on Eric's shoulders. Ashley comforted her sister as best she could. "Do you want us to move you back? While you live with us, we'll find a more comfortable apartment. You'll get a job. At least with Eric, there's always a part-time job in the office. You won't be lost, Clara. I can't go back there. Don't you understand?" I was in tears, Clara. "Every time I see you, my heart bleeds for the good life we had. Why did you think of moving?" He could have worked in his college, but no, he had to go to production. These plans, this nervousness, and Clara was crying and wailing again, unable to talk about anything else. Eric went home. Things were busy. Ashley stayed behind to help and support her sister, at least for the first time. She was well aware that Brian had no chance of survival. That was what the doctors had explained after the autopsy. It was such a case that a heart defect does not manifest itself in any way during a person's life, and it is impossible to be saved from its manifestation without knowing about it beforehand. However, Clara did not want to hear this. She fixated on unbelievable options to save her husband and blamed herself. Ashley almost all the worries of her sister took on herself, and the wake for 9 days held, as Clara remained indifferent. "What's all this for?" Clara said. Would it bring Brian back? And she started crying again. It was impossible to sort out the dead man's personal belongings in front of her. Either she might just become hysterical. Ashley and William tried to get through this burdensome business as quickly as possible when she went to the cemetery. She went to Brian's grave every day and came back in tears. Neither son nor sister could resist. How can you keep a person from loving someone, even if it's a dead person? No matter how much I try to help, but to survive the death of a loved one, each must himself. Ashley had a job waiting for her, and Eric could use the support and care of his wife. But here? Clara should come out of her depression in time, and the absence of her sister will only be good for her. Otherwise, she will continue to live in her fragile shell of grief, unconcerned, disconnected from business, and worrying about her student son. If William didn't break through that wall between mother and everyday life, no one else would. That's what Ashley assumed. It was with a heavy heart that she left her two close, but now lonely people. Long conversations and shared affairs with her nephew had brought them even closer together, and now Ashley called daily not only to her sister, but also to William. "Oh, Aunt Ashley," William lamented. "I don't recognize Mama. She's turning into an old woman. Now she's started going to church. Can you imagine? She prays, she crosses herself, she even smells like a stranger, something heavy. I don't know what to do." They say daughters often repeat their mother's fate. Ashley's sister Clara certainly did. Her husband's death threw her into such a depression that the woman began to melt before her eyes. The son didn't know how to make his mother enjoy life, move. Mother became lethargic, initiative. Everything fell out of her hands. A constant gloomy mood and powerlessness possessed her. Weeks and months dragged on. At first, Clara hardly went to work. It distracted and supported her a little, but one day she simply did not get up in the morning. The doctor called by the exhausted son gave a referral for tests, but in the morning the mother lay listless and did not want to get up. William called his aunt and son-in-law. Immediately the relatives arrived and were amazed at how much she had given up. She was almost an old woman with a faded look, dressed in anything. She spent most of her time in silence, sitting somewhere and looking at herself. The shocked couple decided that they would come every weekend, wasting their energy and money on a short trip. As soon as the work week was over, Ashley and Eric would drive to Clara's house, dragging her out to a restaurant, to the countryside. Her sister even began to smile when she remembered the childhood pranks or words of little William. But no matter what her loved ones did for her, Clara returned to her apathetic state again and again. Soon things got even worse. She started to fall down on the spot. "Son, I can't see anything." With horror she said to William, when he returned from classes and hurriedly prepared lunch, "Would you at least read me what they say in the newspapers?" But immediately she forgot herself and sat aloof, dangling in thoughts unknown to the boy. In the meantime her son was trying, growing older and stronger, calling Ashley, and in an almost enthusiastic voice saying, "Aunt Ashley, I got a part-time job at a restaurant as a waiter. Sometimes I get tips. I'd like to continue. Thanks to Uncle Eric for his help, of course, but I like it. It's more fun, and I'm not the only one here. There are more of us." William's voice sounded cheerful, and he didn't want to object. Let the boy grow up, the couple decided. The money Eric sent them was enough, of course, but William was a man. He dreamed of independence. As it turned out, he was early to rejoice. Soon the part-time job had to be forgotten. His mother's health required his constant attention. It was clear that it was not depression. Soon he was admitted to the hospital. A terrible thing was revealed. They found a tumor in the brain, which was pressing on the optic nerves. The disease progressed so quickly that there was no point in surgery. Within 2 months, Clara was literally burnt out. It was quite unclear whether because of this disease she fell into depression or because of the worries after the death of her husband, so quickly developed a tumor. William was left without a father and mother, and graduation was necessary. "William," Eric said to him, "you study quietly. Don't think about bad things. You can't get your parents back. You have to live, and you have to live successfully and happy." Ashley added, "Yes, happily." Eric confirmed seriously, "Don't worry about money. We will also send you the necessary amount. When you finish your studies, welcome to our company, but in the meantime, for all weekends and vacations, we are waiting for you to come to us." And again traveling sad troubles, again sorting out the things of the closest person, memorial tables and candles. Ashley, this has not been easy. Even more painful for William. Her favorite boy, so kind, so tenacious, so diligent, was without a family. "William, it's normal, when children bury their parents. It's when parents have to lose their children. That's terrible. So take it for what it's worth." "Well, some people have to do it sooner. Some people have to do it later." She kissed him on the top of his head, leaning his blonde head against hers, and tried not to cry. If only he had a girlfriend, it would be less depressing to leave him. But no. He gave himself all to taking care of his mother. He had no time to start a relationship. "Yes, I understand. Aunt Ashley, I'm fine." William reassured her and hid his eyes too. Now they understood a lot about their mother and sister's behavior, but there was nothing they could do. Ashley tried to give her nephew the warmth he received from his mother. As much as it was a pity for the nephew, the couple had to go to their place. They could not live for the young man. In the evenings they could not talk about anything but Clara's death. Could it have been a fatal mistake? Ashley wondered aloud. Maybe Clara should have gone back. At least here we are, the people and the town already settled. Ashley, death will take its toll. Eric said sadly, "You know that very well. It will wait until you fall asleep. It will deceive, but it will steal the one who must die on this day at this hour. Explain it however you want." Yes, Ashley understood. She thought again of her mom, who couldn't get over her husband's death. Her parents were not a quiet, friendly couple. Their relationship was reminiscent of Italian movies. Her jealous mother was always suspicious of her father, calling him back at work if he was late. The father would be patient and silent for a long time, then explode, and the girls, Clara and Ashley, would cover their ears. Then the parents, as if nothing had happened, would dress up and leave for the theater, for a visit or a banquet. They would quickly pack up and leave for the South, entrusting their daughters with an independent existence. The girls laughed at their parents' eccentricities because they knew how they adored each other. The first words when Daddy came home from work were, "Where's Mom? Is she home?" Mother, taking off her shoes in the hallway, already asked, "Where's Daddy? Is he home yet?" And when the father fell under the car, a drunken slob, the mother barely lived without him for a year, then quietly died in her sleep, not giving trouble to her daughters. It seems that with the death of her husband, she completely lost the source of life. She did not raise her voice, did not show any passion, and was a flat, boring aunt, and not even retired yet. If Clara had not had Ashley and Ashley had not had Clara, it is hard to imagine how they would have borne the loss of their parents. Sisterly affection is stronger than the closest friendship, for the sisters have known each other all their lives, since before the youngest was born, and now in the second place after her husband, for Ashley was a nephew William. Ashley herself, God, did not give the child. In their youth, the couple did not suffer about it at all. They had enough of each other's society. They were never bored. So many interesting things around, so many topics for conversation and discussion. The most interesting thing is that they were together or near each other day and night, but Ashley never had a desire to get away from her husband, what is called in long married ladies, to take a break from him. Apparently Eric felt the same way. "Aren't you bored with me?" Ashley asked him. "You've got smart men in your office, and I'm just so-so here." "So you have such smart men in your office?" Eric laughed, "And I'm not much of a man either." He came up to her, ruffled her blonde hair, and said, "Squirrel, it's good that you are a squirrel, isn't it? How much paint do other wives spend to cover their gray hair? We save money, and the main thing is that it's forever. Where are we gonna spend the savings? The wife would pick up on it. Come on, William, why don't we buy something fancy?" Let the girls hang all over him. Let them. Eric waved his hand. "Remember, I had sneakers and fancy jeans. If it wasn't for those clothes, you wouldn't have hung on me for anything." And they continued to tease each other and fool around as if it hadn't been so many years since that romantic time of their crush. Life is just as beautiful despite the time. Sunshine, green trees, mountains, if you drive a bit in the right direction. When Ashley decided to take her women's health seriously and try her luck at childbearing, it turned out that it was too late for her to worry about it. Perhaps some hereditary reason played a role, or maybe the distant hikes gave such a result that children are no longer obtained. Whatever. Eric waved his hand when she told him about the unsuccessful visit to the doctor. Not everyone has to be a parent, and not everyone can. We have William after all. Lukaville maybe just wanted to appease his wife so she wouldn't have an inferiority complex. Ashley will recall this moment many times later. But how do you know how the husband really felt? And what good would it do? You can't get back what you've lost. They are vivacious, full of youthful vigor, have already visited so many countries, it is now easier to travel comfortably and still hike as they did 15 years ago. This summer, William is away on an internship. Why don't we seize the moment? Eric suggested to his wife, "Where have we been? Let's go mountain hiking. Look at the route. Oh, that's a whole new direction. This is my dream." Ashley was happy, light, slim as a girl. She was good-looking and still young in appearance. Her health had never failed her up to this point, but this summer's trek was not going to be easy for Ashley. Already on the train, she felt short of breath. As she stepped onto the platform, her heart clenched. "You look pale." Eric was worried. "Woman's Day." "It's not like that, is it? It's just stuffy." Ashley hastened to refute his suspicions. "It will pass in the air, and what air there is here." And she put her face into the fresh breeze. The climb up the mountain again brought her breathing difficulties, and she felt dizzy and dizzy. She seemed to have walked only a little, but she was already exhausted and sat down right on the path on a large boulder. "All right, let's go down," Eric said sharply. He helped his wife to get up and dragged her down. The descent took a long time, and the couple stopped from time to time so that Ashley could rest. She was put to bed at the bottom, but her strength was too slow to recover. The injections given by the paramedic on duty did not help. Ashley and Eric were driven to the nearest hospital by random hitchhikers in a large Jeep. Other vehicles would hardly have been able to make the journey, or rather, off-road. Eric spent the night in a chair in the hospital hallway. In the morning, he could barely wait for the doctor to examine his wife. Alas, the doctor's hands folded. "Your wife has something more serious than fatigue or malaise by the looks of it. I suppose a CT scan is necessary, and we don't even have a decent X-ray machine." The elderly doctor sighed and thought for a moment. "You know what? We'll keep her here for now, help her body to gather strength, and you contact a serious medical institution. Then you'll know exactly where you're going, and your wife will be able to travel more easily. For now, I would recommend that she rest." A frustrated Eric shook the doctor's hand and went to call his family. They had almost no family left, so they had to look for friends who could help. Calling all the reserves and resources, Eric drove his wife to the Central Center, put her in a good clinic. Friends helped. Neuro specialists suspected the same thing. By all symptoms, it was him cancer. Death, which sneaks up and gnaws into the body stealthily, sneakily. After the necessary time for the examination, Ashley returned home. Even though her sister had died of cancer, she didn't want to believe in this damn diagnosis. How could it be? She asked her husband a question for which there was no answer. "I didn't drink. I didn't smoke. I'm perfectly happy in my personal life. My work is fine." After all, they write that this disease comes from stress, worries. She faltered. Clara's sister also considered herself a happy woman, but it happened as it happened. "Ashley, you don't worry." Eric took her hand. "Medicine doesn't stand still. While you heal, your body will fight, and the scientists, meanwhile, will think of a way to finally defeat the disease. Let's fight till the end. We'll beat it." Ashley believed her husband. Otherwise, how could she live? He had always been her support. And now she also felt that she was not alone in the face of the disease. Never Eric, never gave her a reason not to trust him, never once in his life failed in major matters and issues. All decisions were made together, in concert, so she threw herself into the fight of her life. Drank all possible medicines, used folk remedies, in time to lie down for routine treatment in the hospital. At the same time tried to stay awake, to look after herself. Before my eyes stood the image of a sick sister with faded eyes, waving her hand and eerily indifferent to her appearance. Ashley loved her husband and wanted to remain for him the same desirable and sweet little white girl she had always been. She believed that together they would conquer the disease. Eric was touchingly patient with her, stretching out the hard and dark days when the disease worsened. Weeks of remission came quickly as she took walks, watched movies, read books. Every minute she felt her husband's care, unfailing and unobtrusive. And also, there was always her beloved Marquise. She felt the mistress like no one else. Fluffy Friend did not remember the evil, because the owners always left her alone in the cat cattery when they left on a trip or went camping. But the cat forgave this to people because she was attached to them, and she had already developed an addiction to this mode of existence. She would lie down to her mistress, nestle herself on the sore spot and purr soothingly, stroking Marquise's fluffy fur. Ashley made plans. And when I'm well, thus began her dreamy evening with Eric. Of course, it wasn't easy for her husband. He had to keep up with work, communicate with the doctors treating his wife, organize all the appointments for home treatments, and groceries, cooking, cleaning. He had to take care of that too. Ashley was sometimes completely helpless, and when she was a little bit off, she felt so disgusted with earthly affairs that she wanted to turn her back to the wall and not see anyone. And again her favorite Marquise came to her aid. Probably those who consider their presence in the house healing are right. At any rate, on Ashley, the soft purr of her cozy creature had a healing effect, or, as happened more and more often, at least a calming effect. It wasn't like it had been at the beginning of her illness, when Ashley would burst into work on a good day. What about my boys? Did everything smell like tobacco smoke again, and Linda's not mopping the floors again? She's a mess in the bathroom. Calm down. My husband laughed. We don't have any irreplaceable people, but immediately cut down under her gaze and corrected himself. But there are unique ones. That's our Ashley Betty. All your assistant, of course, will not do as you. Experiences still a little, but in general copes. So don't worry. Rest and regain your strength. I just bought vitamins for you. And he would go to the kitchen, unpack the bags, and switch Ashley's attention to some special overseas fruit. Then, sitting her in a corner not far from him, he would prepare dinner. He realized how dreary it was for a sick person to be home alone all day, without much to do, and often still suffering from nausea and pain. So the first thing he did was to make sure they were in the same room and close to each other in the evenings. Ashley had been preparing a helper for herself for a long time. It was a young woman, Betty, from the local area, a widow with a small child. Because of the child, she was both needy and unable to work full-time, only studying. She was hired part-time, and Ashley soon became convinced that Betty was diligent in her attention to detail, and she began to trust her with more and more important cases. True, she didn't much like Betty's way of talking and loud, annoying laughter. Well, what can you do? It's a new generation. They are so educated and have no complexes, which is also considered good. It works quite well. And still at first Ashley was worried, not for her position, no, for the job, just for how they would manage without her there. But Eric was well aware of the situation in the office. He reassured her. You trained Betty yourself, And you know she's a smart girl, she's trying. So everything's all right with us, and the salary, and the comfort of the workplace. It would seem, what else is there? But recovery did not come. The periods of good health became less frequent and shorter, the exacerbations more frequent and longer. Ashley did not sleep well at night, and from the beginning of her illness, asked to be left alone in bed. Her husband moved into the next room without complaint, for the night, leaving the door open to hear her if she needed anything. Then the need arose for him to work on the papers. When Ashley was well, he could sometimes stay late in his office. Ashley could walk home alone or go to a cafe with her friends, waiting for him to return for a late dinner. But now he was secluded in his room. So little by little, the spouses began to distance themselves from each other. The evenings became quiet. The conversations came to naught. What was there to discuss if they went nowhere together, saw nothing, talked to no one? 5 whole years had passed in such an environment. A saint couldn't stand to be around a sick person for so long. Eric, however, behaved as he always did, continued to care for his wife, and was unfailingly even-tempered and calm. Preoccupied with her own pain, Ashley never reflected on her husband's behavior, believing it to be as it should be. She took his labors for granted. Sick people are so often selfishly blind to other people's problems. Increasingly, she had to resort to sleeping pills and painkillers. Eric had long ago handled these himself masterfully too, like a professional caregiver. Ashley had loved his big, warm hands since the old hikes. They were the skillful, strong hands of a masterful man, but there was a special, gentle strength to them. Or maybe it seemed that way to Ashley. Today he was administering an anesthetic to her, and after the injection the patient lay quietly, turning away as always to the wall, covering her eyelids, listening to what was going on outside. At this time in the kitchen, where her husband was clearing the table after dinner, his cell phone rang. Eric, in a muffled voice, started the conversation. It became clear who he was talking to, the woman who had joined the company in her, Ashley's, place when she became ill. The specifics of the job were so well known to Ashley that she could guess Eric's interlocutor by 2-3 phrases. Yes, it's Betty, of course, a business conversation. But suddenly, his tone changed, cooing, intimate. She knew? Come on, sweetheart. Eric spoke, muffled by his beautiful baritone. Everything will be all right, just a little patience. Tonight? Of course not. No, I can't. She's asleep for now, but she'll wake up soon, won't she? Almost shrieking, Eric immediately lowered his voice to a whisper. I'll see you tomorrow morning. Kisses. Ashley couldn't figure out what this conversation meant. But in general, everything is clear and understandable. Her husband and this rude young lady have a relationship. But is that how it works? How is that possible? It's her husband, her own, the only one, the first and the last. He's caring, he's attentive, he's perfect. Ashley didn't sleep a wink, her temples pounding. Caring, attentive, perfect. Pretending to be asleep until her husband retired to his room for the night. Then she gathered her strength, with great exertion, trying not to make noise, stole from the mezzanine suitcase, with which once in the happy days of the two of them, traveled abroad. Her husband was in the next bedroom, breathing evenly and calmly. She knew his habit, only put his head on the pillow, sleeps like a dead man. She gathered his things more calmly and put them neatly. She took the suitcase to the kitchen beforehand, while it was empty. She knew that she couldn't lift a full one and wouldn't carry it. She looked at the closet shelves again. That's it, I think, everything. I packed the essentials. I sat in the armchair until dawn, either in oblivion or in a half-slumber, but I had no strength to think about what was happening. The faithful Marquisa nestled at her feet. It was morning. I heard Eric get up, go to the bathroom, then into the bathroom. Ashley got up from her seat and went into the kitchen. She poured water into the kettle and lit the gas burner. "You're not drinking tea today," she said, as if to herself, but it was addressed to her husband. He had just entered the kitchen, wiping his face and neck with a snow-white towel. "Good morning. How did you sleep, little squirrel? Why are you up so early?" He reached for her with a kiss, but Ashley pulled away and he almost tripped over the suitcase. "What's this?" Immediately his face began, before Ashley's eyes, to lose its features. It was very frightening to see. There was one man standing in front of her, and in half a minute there was another, completely lost, crumbling, a stranger. He understood everything. "Go away," Ashley said calmly. "I heard you talking." "There's a child in there, Ashley," he said after a moment's silence. "A son, he's 3 years old. Forgive me, I couldn't tell you. It would have been too cruel. Were you hoping I'd die and never find out?" asked Ashley in an alien voice. "I'm sorry there's no way I could die. Then you'd be married. Go away." Eric silently picked up his suitcase and left. Ashley looked at him and wondered how this man who was so dear to her, was now suddenly a stranger. How could it be? She was in a sort of suspended state, in a stupor, unable not to cry, not to curse her lovers. She froze and then went to the window, then sat in the chair, staring thoughtlessly in front of her. I couldn't realize what had happened, and a day later I ended up in the hospital, in a very bad condition. "Did you have some kind of stress?" asked the doctor, a nice dry woman, a little younger than Ashley herself. "No," dimly Ashley answered, though it was clear from her voice that yes, of course she had. This time the treatment was very hard and slow. An ambulance had been called by a neighbor. There was no one to take Marquise to the usual place. Worried about the cat, who was left without care and supervision for the first time, Ashley called her nephew. "William, try to come, please. I'm begging you, honey. The cat's all alone in there." I didn't have time to warn anyone. Ashley herself did not understand why now, after so many days of loneliness and patience, large tears rolled down her cheeks. Before, she had been like a dried-up pond with cracks in the bottom, dark, soulless, dried up. William was upset that his aunt was in the hospital again and promised to come soon. He was quite satisfied with the squeezed-in business trip when he asked in surprise where Eric was. His nephew had indeed arrived. He was to not only take care of his aunt, but also to be a thimble to listen to Ashley's difficult account of what had happened. "Aunt Ashley?" he said, hugging the thin woman. "You're strong. Do you remember how you took care of your mom? How you explained everything to her so well?" "I can't do that. But you realize you have to live, don't you?" "And Uncle Eric?" "Let him live once, maybe. You're right." Ashley supported him warmly. "Let him live. As long as he's taken care of me, I should be grateful to him. Don't you, William?" She looked inquiringly into the young man's eyes, but he averted his gaze. What could he say? How could he, to answer for a grown, strong man? Everyone makes his own choices. From that day on, the boy helped his aunt in every way he could. He came at her every call, took on all the cases that required walking, visiting all sorts of instances. He also communicated with doctors and delivered medicines. It was good that he was well regarded by his superiors at his workplace, where he worked for the 2nd year after graduating from the institute. Realizing the need to travel, they let him go, gave him time off. Once William came to bring his aunt from the hospital and decided to clean up so that the apartment was at least clean. He was scrubbing the floors when the doorbell rang and Eric stood on the doorstep. "Hello, William," he said hello grimly, not showing surprise. "Hi." William was a little confused. "Don't you have a key?" "Yes, why not?" Eric pulled a rattling bunch out of his pocket. "It's just inconvenient, so I wanted to give it back to Ashley." "Come on in." William moved aside to make way. "I'm cleaning the floors because Aunt Ashley's being discharged tomorrow, so I thought I'd freshen up the air, so to speak." Eric held himself as stiffly as a guest. It was obvious he was uncomfortable, and the conversation was not going well. Meanwhile, William boiled the kettle, put cookies and butter on the table, and made tea. Having poured it into cups, he moved it to the guest and made an inviting gesture. "Well, let's drink tea." All his movements were practiced, taking care of his mother, gave the skills of housekeeping. Got to the lad. Thought Eric, he coughed embarrassedly. And here I am." The boy looked at him uncomprehendingly, but so bright and ingenuous was his look that Eric himself did not realize how he had talked about what was troubling him. "You can judge me, of course." He began. "Yes, I'm a traitor. Ashley's my only love, but it just so happens that this woman—" He hesitated, but he didn't call Betty by name. "She turned out to be pregnant, a casual affair, fleeting, but it kept me going. You see, she was silent, but she kept looking at me like that. And I was tired, I weakened. That's the way it came out." William listened to him silently, keeping his eyes down. When Eric sighed heavily and clutched his head with both hands resting on his knees. "And then my son was born, and that was it. I couldn't leave them. Now the son is 3 years old." They sat in silence. Then William said, "Uncle Eric, I'm not your judge. You've always helped me. But I know one thing for sure. Aunt Ashley would never leave you. 5, 10 years, all her life she would have been with you. I know she would." Eric almost whispered, "I know, which is why I don't apologize." He rose heavily from his chair and put his keys beside the cup, not touching the tea. Monica listened to Ashley and realized that she didn't want to be this old, this sick, this lonely. She already wanted to leave this dull, empty apartment, to start living somehow differently, to be light at heart, light in the house. Yet she sympathized with Ashley with all her heart and was ready to help her. And so the day came before the trip to the hospital. Ashley had warned her in advance, and Monica came in the evening with the express intention of taking the cat home with her. Ashley had also prepared in advance. "Monica, here's the carrier. Marquise is used to it, and here's the rest of the food. However, I haven't been out lately, so it's not much, but I think it's enough for a couple of days, and this is the most necessary. These are our Marquise's favorite toys." She put a ball, a rubber mouse, and a couple of other items next to it. The woman said goodbye to her pet for a long time, whispering affectionately in her ear, only she could hear the words. Then she let her go, and Marquise silently climbed into the carrier. "Well then, we're off," said Monica, and finally, taking the carrier in one hand and the bag of things in the other, she walked toward the exit. "Goodbye, Ashley. Have a good day. I'll be sure to call you." Ashley nodded and turned back to the window, holding back tears. Outside the window, a cold fall rain was falling in unison with her mood. While Monica had been carrying Marquise home, she had gotten soaked. Waiting for the bus in the rain wasn't very pleasant either, so she decided to take the easy way out. Walked, still drying herself off. Her apartment was warm and cozy. As she let the cat out of the carrier, she said, "Welcome to your new home, Marquisa. Now you will be the mistress here. Keep order, catch mice. You remember the main thing here." She stroked the cat affectionately, let it down on the floor, and went about her business. She hung up her wet coat and scarf and put her shoes on the drying rack. Marquise sat by her things at first, then slowly began to settle in. She walked for a long time in her new home, looked in all corners. All this she did in silence. She slept on her cot, which she had given to Ashley, and from then on she slept on it only. In the morning, Monica went to work, poured food and water on her, and punished her. "Marquise, you stay for the mistress. Is that a deal? If anything, meow to me. Bye-bye." And she left. It took a while for the new resident to get used to the apartment and the landlady. Monica didn't know how Marquisa behaved during the day, alone in empty rooms. She left for her office early in the morning, returned in the evening. Always worried, how was Marquise without her? Did she long for her old home, for her original mistress? She was worried about the cat's health, but when she came back in the evening, she made sure that she had eaten a little. Not much, but enough not to starve or lose weight. She sighed, then put the litter tray away and took the white Marquise in her arms. "You're my goodest sweetheart. I know this is hard for you. You're like a flower that's been transplanted into different soil. Mommy didn't betray you, you know that. It's just the way it is, and I'll take care of you. Don't be sad, my dear. We'll be friends, okay?" The cat listened and was silent. It had never once raised its voice since it had moved into Monica's apartment. It was strange, confusing, and a little scary. Monica was worried, then decided to calm down and wait because the cat was healthy and did not show any signs of anxiety. "Why are you so silent?" she asked, stroking Marquise's soft fur. "Are you sad? I promise you that we will visit your mommy, Marquise. Don't be sad." Several times Monica called Ashley at the hospital, then sent pictures of Marquise. The woman was very grateful to her, but her voice grew quieter and quieter each time. Several months passed. Then one day close to spring, Monica's call was not answered, and the next day neither. Then a man answered the phone. "Hello, are you calling for Aunt Ashley? She's in the hospital." "It's her nephew." "William?" Monica almost shrieked. "This is Monica, a friend of hers. I know she's in the hospital. Is she sick?" "Hello, Monica. Auntie has gotten worse. She's been unconscious for 2 days." William sounded depressed. "How long are you here for? Will you be with her?" Monica shifted from foot to foot excitedly. Suddenly she wanted to help Ashley very badly. "I've taken a vacation. Auntie has no one but me," William explained. How could he know that Monica would know about this detail of Ashley's biography? So Monica decided, "William, will you let me visit her? Why don't we lie to the doctors so they'll let me in? I'm not a relative, and I need to see her so badly to reassure her." "Well, let's try." William was a little confused by this pressure. The girl realized that arguments were necessary. "You see, I have Ashley's cat, Marquise. I'd like to calm her down, tell her about the cat, explain that everything is all right. Maybe it would make her feel better." "Oh, that's what it is." William rejoiced. "Are you the girl with the beautiful eyes and the kind heart? Aunt Ashley has told me all about you. Come tomorrow between 2 and 5, and I'll tell her you're my fiancé." Monica was embarrassed and confused at the same time. She hadn't expected such compliments, so she could only say, "Thank you, see you tomorrow." In the night, the girl woke up from the fact that in her head, from somewhere a vivid picture arose. In a bright room, she held in her hands a snow-white cat, as if the picture had formed. Yes, she must make her way to Ashley with Marquise. The drive to the hospital, with the cat in her bag, was easy, but at the hospital itself, Monica chickened out. She tried to get past the grenadier-looking janitor who sat on the walkway to the stairs leading to the bedside rooms, but she was wary. Though there were many visitors, she caught Monica's eye and shouted, because she apparently couldn't speak quietly. "Where are you going, sweetheart?" Room 255, Ashley's room." Monica got excited again. "Here's a pass." Thank God, the same William took care of the pass and called her in advance, warning her that she could get it there and there, otherwise the janitor wouldn't let her through. Groom. Monica grinned to herself. The Marquise did not let her down, neither dreaming nor thinking. Unaware of the zoo in her bag, the janitor nodded, and Monica started to go up to the right floor. Here was the right room. Opening the door quietly, Monica prepared to see Ashley's dead face, which was the only reason the reality didn't stun her. Ashley lay with her eyes closed, her mouth outlined, a thin line of bloodless lips, her breath moving the sheet on her chest almost imperceptibly. Had there been other patients in the ward, Monica would hardly have been able to recognize at once the mistress of the Marquise, so changed was she, and the formerly thin and pale, now Ashley's face, had quite lost its individual features, had become as if a symbol, a sketch of a human face. A dream, Monica thought. This is my dream. The room, already painted white, was even brighter from the sun and the snow outside the window. It was a depersonalized, lifeless white, frightening in its perfection. It took some getting used to. Monica stood at the door for a moment, then slowly approached the patient's bed. Carefully she took the cat, which had made no sound so far, out of the bag and carefully placed it on Ashley's bed. The Marquise, without a glance at the foreign walls, at once lay down beside her mistress and began to lick her hands. Monica was astonished at this instant foundation. "My God!" she whispered in respectful horror. "Marquise, did you recognize her?" And then the cat screamed. The sound could not be called a meow. It was a wild cry, never heard before by Monica, as if the animal were in terrible pain. The Marquise was bidding farewell to her mistress. Terrified by the heart-rending moans of Marquise, Monica grabbed the cat tightly in her arms and rushed out of the room, then back down the corridor, up the stairs to the exit, leaving behind her bewilderment, turmoil and horror. She could not see how the orderlies and nurses ran to the room of the patient. Patients who could move independently to find the source of the terrible howling, paralyzing and inspiring animal terror. But what she knew for certain was that Ashley had stopped breathing that very night, not long after she and Marquise had fled the hospital. And Monica was finally convinced that she had been right to let the two loving souls, human and feline, say goodbye to each other. Then came the funeral. There was only a small handful of mourners at the funeral ceremony, consisting of neighbors and a few former co-workers of the deceased. A young man in his early 30s stood close to the coffin, his face expressing genuine grief. Monica guessed that it was William. As they began to disperse, Monica approached him to introduce herself and offer her condolences. "I'm sorry to have to meet you under such sad circumstances," she said. "Your aunt loved you very much." "Thank you, Monica," he said, shaking her hand with a light, musician-like motion. "It was a great comfort to Aunt Ashley that you agreed to take care of her cat. She said she was completely at peace now." "Oh, really?" Monica was embarrassed. "I'm fine with the Marquise. Would you let me visit her?" asked William. Yes, of course. Monica explained how to get to her from Ashley's house, where William was to stay for the first time, and they said goodbye. At home, Monica sat for a long time without doing or thinking. The cat was already used to meeting her mistress at the door and waited patiently for her to separate. The girl went to the armchair, took Marquise in her arms. She murmured some quiet words, then faintly hummed some forgotten songs that suddenly came to mind. Such 5 minutes in the evenings became their custom. Marquise received the warmth of human hands, listened with pleasure to the soft female voice. Monica relaxed, stroking the white smoothness of the cat's back, and listened to the purring of the animal. "Here we are, Marquise, just the two of us," Monica told me quietly. "Your mother has left us, but don't be sad for her. She has calmed down now, she is well, she is not in pain, and you and I will remember her with a kind word." A few days passed after Ashley's funeral and William called. Monica invited him to visit, remembering his request to visit Marquise. In the evening she hastily set the tea table. There was no need to clean up for her guest. Monica and Marquise's house was always in perfect order, as if in the absence of her mistress, the cat had been diligently keeping it clean and cozy. William came at the agreed time. He brought Marquise a large bag of cat treats and toys. Monica immediately at the entrance handed a luxurious bouquet of fragrant lilies, and she immediately placed the fragrant flowers in the middle of the table. The cat treated the generous gifts favorably, even tried the new balls with regal strokes of her paw. Then it settled down in its usual place and looked at the couple talking at the table with closed eyes and purred contentedly. Meanwhile, William took out a bottle of Prosecco. "Monica, do you have a corkscrew?" "Oh, I don't have one. I've never needed one." The hostess was confused. She couldn't tell her that she had been living alone all these years without merry company. Frankly speaking, her evenings were no different from the evenings of an old pensioner, and meanwhile at work, she was quite sociable and was quite attractive. "Oh no," said William resolutely. The straight line would be drawn, problem solved. The bottle must be opened and drunk. I can't afford any weakness today. How can I not drink good wine with such a beautiful woman on my first meeting? Monica, lively and cheerful, carried more and more tools. "Try a fork, and here's a knife." "Oh, wait, I have a screwdriver." And she, giggling, dragged the most valuable, in her opinion, tool that could only exist in the house of an old bachelor. Laughing at her own dexterity, William managed to open the bottle with the tools at hand. Monica brought glasses. The first toast was to acquaintance. Both liked the wine. Then they drank, remembering the departed Ashley, without clinking glasses. Aunt Ashley was only 48, a little less than Mom. William said sadly, "She was my mom for the last few years. She called every day, sent me money, even bought me and Uncle Eric clothes without me. Aunt Ashley used to guess my size and my tastes." "Oh, Eric, was he at the funeral?" Monica asked. "No, I didn't call him. But their mutual co-workers said he was away with the baby just these days for some kind of baby checkup. You know, Monica, Ashley's aunt, didn't say anything about him at the end of his illness, but I think she forgave him. She loved him very much and thought, I guess, that he deserved such happiness, a son, at least in his old age. And I guess I'm a maximalist. I can't forgive Uncle Eric. I talk to him whenever I get the chance, even understand to some extent his deed. But you know, Aunt Ashley, she was all straight and honest, no niggles anywhere, no corner of the secret. She should have been happy, from beginning to end. But it's that damn disease. I'm so sorry we met her so late," answered Monica. "I always dreamed of having a friend, Ashley older. the more I was good with her. Oh, you just didn't see her young Monica. She was all fire and brimstone, lighting everybody up. She was bright, you know? Uncle Eric always called her white for a reason. Still, she had a wonderful life, didn't she? Monica looked up at him. And from what you remember, she gave herself to life to the full. That's great, but I always wondered if she was alone. She had friends, comrades from way back. She remembered them so warmly, I didn't feel comfortable asking about it. It was her choice, Monica. Aunt Ashley, a person of great dignity. William spoke of Ashley as if she were alive. When she got sick, she deleted herself from all social media. She even stopped answering her phone. She was determined that she would not overshadow other people's lives. Let her friends not see her helpless, weak, balding after chemo. She had to make an exception for me. We've always been very close. How could she do without support? Physically, it was impossible. William confirmed that he would be selling the apartment in 6 months. Legally, he was only entitled to it after that time, but today they felt so good that they didn't want to talk about business or anything sad anymore. William and Monica sat up until almost dawn. It seemed to both of them that they had known each other for a very long time. It was amazing how much they had in common: movies, favorite songs, poems, even writers and poets they liked the same. Saying goodbye, William suddenly kissed Monica on the cheek. In the afternoon, having guests during his lunch break, he called her again. Monica, I've been urgently summoned to work. I'm leaving tonight, and I was so looking forward to seeing you today. What can I do? He said pitifully, so let me come and see you off. Monica blurted out without thinking, and she was surprised at her own determination. William was delighted. Really? I wouldn't dream of it. Come straight from work to my Aunt Ashley's apartment. You and I will have dinner together somewhere, and then we'll go to the train station. It was a very short evening, but just as wonderful as the last. A light dinner, a farewell at the train station, and Monica was home. Caring William himself called and paid for a cab so that the girl was not alone at night on the deserted streets. The farewell kiss made Monica's head spin. Marquise, what shall I do? Said she to her shaggy-haired friend. I like him so much. How can I live alone now, Marquise? Marquise purred reproachfully in her arms, indignant. You have me. You're not alone. Monica's life was now filled with a great bright feeling. She happily got up in the early morning, squeezed her cat, ran to work, forgetting all about her limp. By the way, she used to exaggerate her handicap. So Monica decided, looking at herself again and again in the big mirror in the hallway. Even though William was not around, she still expressed and fancied herself every day. She had to look her best every minute now, and he called more than once a day, and their conversations were full of those hints, those innuendos that truly bring two people together. They developed a shared life there in the cloudy, ephemeral space that gives air to existence. Monica pictured William beside her. Yes, he is not handsome, but he is so good with his gorgeous smile, his quick, dexterous movements. And most importantly, he treats her so carefully, as if she were made of something beatable, alert to all her movements. One of the sunny June days, the doorbell rang. Monica, in a kerchief and an old robe, who was not expecting anyone, came to open the door to the sudden guest. William? Monica was both bewildered and delighted. And here I am. She looked around the room, which was chaotic as usual. Monica decided to change the wallpaper and freshen things up. In the back of her mind, she was waiting for William to arrive, for it would soon be 6 months since Ashley's death, and he would have to inherit the apartment. I'll make something for breakfast. She hurried after the first greetings. "No, Monica, I'm not going to let you do anything on the day I arrive. Get dressed, we're going to a nice place." They left everything in the same disheveled state and went to smoke at a cafe owned by an old acquaintance of William's. Juicy steaks, sparkling wine, fruit. Monica enjoyed it all and marveled at how much pleasantness and pleasure there was in life. And why did she think it wasn't all for her? William had opened her little joys, but he had also become her great joy. "Do you like it?" he asked Monica lovingly, looking into her face. Chewing the grapes, Monica only mooed amusedly, showing that she was at the height of her pleasure. William's arrival had a practical purpose. He was going to sort out the paperwork. Monica's help with the legal matters would be of great help to him. After lunch, they worked on the paperwork and made a plan to sell Ashley's apartment. "Honey, you may be wondering why I don't want to move in there myself and live next door to you," William asked softly, removing a curl of hair from Monica's neck. The girl was embarrassed. She had actually hoped in her heart that he would do just that, and now she suddenly pictured him in the empty and droning rooms where Ashley had spent so many sorrowful and agonizing months waiting to die. Hopelessness, everything in those walls was written by her. Sterile to the point of creepiness, the apartment was lifeless, and despite the light from the large windows eerie. The sensation was so clear that she didn't realize she'd cried out. "No, no, William, don't live there." He understood her impulse, for that was why he did not think of Ashley's dwelling as his own. "No, Monica, we will live very differently. I'll do everything for you as you wish only, what?" Monica was scared, but it would be worth your while to begin. He paused, frowning, pretending to laugh at her confusion. "Marry me." Monica laughed, waving her arms, and then he was spinning her around the room, and she was laughing, wrapping her arms around his neck. The scraps of the old wallpaper also flew up into the air, and this strange salute was happening of its own accord, in honor of their happy future union. On the window, away from this outrage, sat a regal white cat and condescendingly tweaked its whiskers. What children these people are, after all. After a few months, the young people bought a wonderful house and moved away from the noisy city. Every evening, Monica made tea in the gazebo near the house. William turned on the speakers, and the couple listened to music. The gorgeous Marquise always lay in her new owner's arms and purred peacefully.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Outside the door, hospital life was buzzing. Jacob sat at the resident's desk and filled out the histories of his patients. When he was a student, he had learned to disconnect from everything that interfered with thinking. It was a useful skill he used whenever work was at its fullest the previous night. The same thing had happened. An emergency situation had occurred. After midnight, a bleeding man was brought to the ward. The victim was brought in on a cart. Friends, drinking buddies, who, like the wounded man himself, were far from a little over. Interrupting each other, they told the doctor on duty. "How did the accident happen?" "Doc, we were just sitting around and nothing. And then Leo wanted to do an experiment. His wife keeps reproaching him for not being a man, like Leo's hands don't grow from there. So Leo decided to prove her wrong." From the story, accompanying the patient, Jacob realized that Leo dope in his head wanted to work with metal. But when he turned on the machine, which many years ago he had installed in the garage, something went wrong. The iron from which the accumulated in the houseman was going to make a flower broke out of his hands, and the sharp end entered the stomach. Although they were drinking themselves, they could hardly keep on their feet, and they realized that their friend could give God his soul, because one of the companions to the place of the banquet arrived by horse-drawn transport. They decided not to call an ambulance. "Guys, finally, we'll get to the hospital faster. Otherwise, while our medics arrive, Leo will be glued to his flippers. The owner of the truck was very close to the truth, because the surgeon had to urgently gather a team to save the inadequate. The medics spent almost 4 hours to eliminate the consequences of the favorite experiment. The course of the operation was also complicated by the fact that anesthesia did not take the patient for a long time, and everyone was afraid that he would die from a great loss. But the man crawled out of the clutches of death and barely came off the anesthesia. With astonishment, examined the neighbors on the ward. "Guys, where are we? I don't know this place, and my head is ringing like a bell. Let me get a hangover." It so happened that the patient uttered these first words after the operation during his morning rounds. However, Leo mistook Jacob for one of his friends. But the doctor calmly responded to the patient's request. "Everything, brother, today is canceled. And in general, you will have to stop drinking." Leo shrieked, holding his hand over his stitched-up stomach. "No way, and who are you to tell me what to do?" Jacob calmly began to explain to the patient that he was in the hospital. Only Leo began to understand something, as at that very moment a furious woman with a red mop of hair on her head burst into the room. Not paying attention to the doctors and patients, she rushed to the love and began to shake his infirm body. "Why did you trash the garage? How many times have I asked you not to drive drunkards? But you just can't help yourself." Rough physical impact caused the victim a lot of pain. And he screamed. "Raya's supposed to. I'm in pain, of course." Jacob didn't expect to see such an impressive scene of family strife play out before his eyes. In the first seconds, he was a little confused, and then resolutely stood between the indignant woman and the patient's bed. "Ladies and gentlemen, what are you doing here? We barely saved your husband. Leave the room." The doctor's actions, especially his decisive tone, had a sobering effect on Emily, although she, unlike her husband, had no inclination to drink hard liquor. The woman folded her arms on, breasts of metal. "I'm sorry I'm not myself. He's poisoned my whole life. I can't stand this outrage anymore." Leo intuitively felt that the situation had changed in his favor, and with a pained expression on his face began to justify himself to Ray's wife. "It's all demons. Remember, I told you that the evil force has been hunting for me for a long time. And yesterday, too, as soon as I drank red wine, they and a few other devils began to persuade me to turn on the machine. They told me that I could be the second, and that my work would soon be auctioned off for the price of a nice yacht." The woman mumbled through her tears. "You're a fool, Leo." Turning to Jacob, she began to explain. "My Leo has had an extraordinary talent since childhood. When he was young, he studied to be an artist and drew pictures." Leo interrupted his wife. "How many times can I tell you that they paint pictures? They paint the remarks of the husband." Emily did not react and continued, "Painted paintings for sale. And then out of the blue I started singing. I did everything I could to stop him. I chased his friends away, I spiked his vodka with note grass, all to no avail." Leo chuckled. "I'm like that, you can't test me with anything." His wife threw a threatening look in his direction and whispered, "Doctor, I wish I'd had time to ask you to stitch that ampoule in his stomach before the operation. You know what I mean." Emily looked pleadingly straight into his eyes, and Jacob did not know how to answer her culturally. After a long pause, he said, "I understand your anguish, but you are addressing the wrong address." At Emily's eyes sparkled in tears, and she reproachfully declared, "Right people say that our medicine is not capable of anything." Vaughn knew that over-the-river lives puts everyone on their feet, does not refuse anyone. The nurse, who was also present in the ward during the rounds, caught a threatening note in the voice of the local resident, and became, "You are right," to pull Emily out of the room. "Go, please, do not interfere with the doctor examining the patients," proudly shook the red-haired Punches. Emily left the room and Jacob was able to continue examining his patients. After the rounds, Nurse Tonika, as if, "By the way, told the doctor you are a new person at us, and have not yet had time to get acquainted with the peculiarities of local life. The fact is that specialists do not stay with us for long, so the population is forced to turn to healers, although most of such healers are charlatans. There is no other alternative. It is true that a young witch doctor who settled 3 years ago by the river really helps people. Tamichka wanted to add something else to her story, but at the last second she changed her mind. Jacob did not pay much attention to her words, although there was a case in his life, confirming the high effectiveness of unconventional methods of treatment. The man tried not to remember about that period, as it caused heartache. In Jacob's life, there were many difficult moments that he wanted to forget about. More than once he tried to start from scratch, but he did not always succeed. He had set out a month ago with such intentions too, although he hadn't planned a change of residence. But in the surgical department of the city hospital, where he had worked for almost 7 years, there was an unhealthy environment. And it happened after the superintendent appointed a reprimand Peter after the retirement of the old superintendent. The duties of the head for almost 6 months performed Jacob, and everyone was convinced that his candidacy is about to be approved at the top. But these optimistic predictions were not destined to come true. One morning, Jacob habitually opened the door of his office and froze from surprise. Behind his desk, a strange man stretched out languidly. Jacob did not start a scandal and delicately asked, "Sorry, I do not know what to call you, but I wonder why you are in my office." The guest jumped up and in one leap crossed the distance separating them, without giving Jacob a second thought. He shyly embraced him. "Jacob, my friend, don't you recognize me?" Jacob took a closer look and hardly recognized the fat man. If you take off the smugness of Peter's face, who in his student years was a course younger than him, already then about this guy there were ambiguous rumors that like this is the son of an official from the highest echelon, and therefore in front of him automatically open all the doors, because Jacob did not have to previously cross paths with Peter, as he was called in the eyes of acquaintances. He did not pay attention to such gossip. Jacob didn't think fate would bring him back together with this upstart. 15 years after graduation, Peter's embrace lasted longer than the time foreseen for this summer. So Jacob had to use force to free himself from his guest. He responded to Peter's ebullient greeting, quite restrained. "I'm sorry, I really didn't recognize you right away. You've changed a lot, you know." Peter immediately took offense. Every man has his faults. Although, in principle, my imposing build does not cause me much discomfort. Genetics is to blame. My appetite is fine. We're all Peter people, but I don't consider it a disadvantage. Jacob did not want to listen to the summarily speech of the visitors, because he had a busy working day ahead of him. "Peter, I basically don't care what your weight is, and I'm not interested in other people's personal problems. It's surgery day, and every minute counts. But I realize it's no coincidence that you're in my office this morning. I'd like to hear an explanation for this intrusion." Peter was much shorter than Jacob, and he did not succeed in looking down on his rival. He thrust up his chin and spoke defiantly to Jacob. "This is not an invasion. As of today, I am acting superintendent. My nomination was approved last night." There was an awkward pause. Apparently, Peter expected his opponent to object or bemoan the loss of his position. But Jacob took the news very calmly. "Thank you. Now everything is clear." Jacob quickly gathered his papers and headed for the exit. "That's it, I've cleared the room. You can settle in." Peter barely shook his head, making it clear that from this day on he would decide whom to punish and whom to pardon. And indeed, with the appearance of a new head, the situation in the department has deteriorated sharply. Not only Peter had no practical experience, but he was giving out his recommendations left and right. Peter brought his own staff to the department, which the old workers did not want to put up with. To their discontent, the new manager replied, "I'm not keeping anyone here who doesn't like a free exit. There are no irreplaceable people." Jacob tried to reason with Peter. "Peter, I think you got off on the wrong foot. You can't throw away experienced personnel like that. After all, medicine is a field where the loss of one good fighter can affect the result of the entire battle." Peter's sensible remark has got his chin up again. "Jacob, I do not need your advice. My main task is to organize the work in the unit entrusted to me, and I will pursue that goal with all means at my disposal. Do you like it or not?" Jacob had to keep his opinions to himself. In a few months at the helm, Peter had dispersed the old staff. He encouraged snitching in every possible way, and liked to organize at the meetings demonstrative floggings of the guilty. At the same time, Peter completely disregarded the rules of medical anthology. When Jacob reprimanded him, he in his characteristic manner replied, "I do not care about your offenses. In my department, everyone has to work with the utmost dedication, and people worked hard." Many could not stand such a schedule and left. Only Jacob continued to believe that things could change for the better. But as the days went by, months went by, and the situation only worsened. It became completely unbearable when Peter single-handedly, without coordination with common sense, began to promote the products of his own relative, who headed a large pharmaceutical company. Since Jacob was the lead surgeon, the superintendent summoned him to her office. Jacob intuitively felt that the upcoming conversation did not bode well for him. Peter, as always, with ostentatious arrogance said, "Sit down, Jacob. You know yourself. There is no truth in feet." Familial address cut on the nerves, but Jacob restrained himself. "It's all right, Peter. I'll stand. I don't have time to sit around. The patients are waiting." The superintendent's face was distorted by a squeamish grimace. "Oh ho ho, you'd think you were indispensable. I have to start by reprimanding you. Remember once and for all, I am your boss and you are my subordinates, so address me properly. I mean by name and patronymic." The insolence of this self-loving baboon was infuriating. But Jacob emphasized, politely replied, "I have exactly the same counter-proposal for you. I, like you, have an extremely negative attitude to any manifestation of panic." Peter's eyebrows went up. "Even so. Well, I'll take that into consideration. Jacob, now let's get down to business." The superintendent tossed a small box across the table. "This is a new breakthrough drug developed by a domestic manufacturer. Look to whom in our department it can be assigned." Jacob immediately realized where the head of the department was bending. He forcefully pushed back the package with the drug. "I will not prescribe an unapproved drug. I'm ordering you." Peter's face reddened with indignation and covered with sweaty, twin sweats, but Jacob was not impressed by his anger. The surgeon firmly repeated, "I will not prescribe to the sick, untested remedies. And if you insist, Peter, I will appeal to the federal ministry. You don't think you alone have an omnipotent hand." After this altercation, the relationship between the chief and the lead surgeon soared completely. Peter, with the help of his snitches, watched the surgeon's every move. And when Jacob made an inexcusable mistake, refusing one patient in hospitalization, the head of the case blown up. Jacob was summoned to the regional department. They read out the entire form. He received a reprimand with a note and was deprived of a bonus for 6 months. Endless battles with the superintendent swamped Jacob. He felt on the verge of a breakdown and decided to have a man-to-man talk with Peter. Peter listened to him, and then with the same ostentatious superiority, said to Jacob, "Maybe I'll forgive you, if you ask me nicely." "Good. How's that?" Jacob expected the chief to start pushing that dubious drug on him again. But Peter came up with a more elegant punishment. "When you need something badly, it's not a bad thing to get down on your knees." Jacob laughed outright. "Peter, you should definitely consult a psychiatrist. You're overcome with unhealthy fantasies." That same day, he wrote a letter of resignation. One of the best surgeons in the city had been out of work for a month. He was about to take a job in the ER when he got the call from Andrew. "Jacob, I heard a rumor that you're out of work." "Yeah, I took a short break, but I got some ideas. I'm looking to change the field a little bit." Andrew yelled into the phone. "Don't even think about it. You're a surgeon from God. You dropped in on me. I want to offer you a place." Andrew Jacob was in the same class with Andrew. They were on a humanitarian mission together in Africa. Then their paths diverged. Andrew later graduated from the military department and was in hot spots. Once he was very unlucky and got a serious wound, after which he could not operate. When he was offered a position in the regional Ministry of Health, he accepted. As a man devoted to his favorite profession, Andrew did everything to save human life, in the global sense of the expression, having learned about the difficulties of Jacob, with whom they had been traveling around the world for several years. The high official immediately engaged in the employment of a friend. Jacob did not wait for a second invitation, and on the same day went to visit whom he greeted him warmly and immediately said, "There is a vacancy for a surgeon. Of course, you can refuse such an unenviable position, but this district hospital in the next 2 years will be renovated. I don't have to tell you what prospects await you." Jacob weighed the pros and cons and agreed to move to the backwoods. "Thank you, Andrew. I don't really have much of a choice, so I'll take you up on your offer." Andrew gave the surgeon a friendly pat on the shoulder. "A change of scenery will do you good. Perhaps in this you will meet your destiny." This wish embarrassed the man, who had long ago given up the search for his happiness. All his attempts to merge the family nest ended in painful losses, and he had long ago got rid of illusions. He put all his energies into his work. Sergiv was not distinguished by its scale. This small town is nestled on a hill and terrain. From the cave they are along and across, large and small rivulets. Many natural water bodies did not have names for easy orientation. The local population used such terms as the river behind the dark forest, or the river near the poultry farm. Molly learned the peculiarities of local toponymy as a child, when she and her mother came to visit Wendy. But in 20 years, things have changed. Even in such a wooded corner as Native Village, only an unnamed rivulet, flowing almost right next to the house. The old Snakhar still rolled merrily in its waters into the unknown distance. In the spring, it fell apart, flooding the nearby meadows, but by the end of May it returned to its usual course again. And then it could be waded across on any property. Wendy's modest home had long ago been on a topsy-turvy path. For dozens of years, this woman had been doing her best to help the people of the district center and the small villages scattered on both sides of the creek. When Znaharina finished her earthly journey, the baton was taken over by her young relative Molly, appeared in the cabin across the creek in the middle of winter. In midsummer, she gave birth to a baby boy. The villagers told various legends about the girl and the unknown father of her child. Although more than 3 years have passed since that time, the folk myth-making has not died down. Of course, to the very heroine of these stories reached the scandalous rumors. But Molly did not attach any importance to them. When especially curious comrades pestered the girl with questions, she smilingly answered all sorts of in their own sophisticated. Such an answer caused misunderstanding and gossip. And try to find out whether you do not care what people say about the forest with the same childish smile answered, "Let them talk." That's what language is given to man to speak. A smart person would think before believing such stories. They are clever. Everything is forgivable for such people. Such statements of the young Znakhar caused bewilderment. A girl of 25, no more than 25, and she talks as if she had a whole life behind her. However, those who expressed such an opinion was not far from the truth, because in her short life, this girl had time to learn and the bitterness of the loss of a loved one and betrayal of a friend. But she did not break and continued to believe in people. A new day was just dawning brightly in the east, and Molly was already on her feet. She had set out a plan of work from the evening, and now began to fulfill the first item of breakfast. If someone had told her 5 years ago that she would be counting minutes and seconds, Molly would not have believed such nonsense. The boy mumbled something in his sleep, and the young woman rushed to her son's crib. But the alarm was false, and she tiptoed into the miniature kitchen and began cooking. Although Molly had little culinary experience, she was pressured by her mother. "Daughter, remember once and for all, you can only cook food when you're in a good mood. If the hostess is angry or dissatisfied, it will definitely affect the taste of the food." Mom left this world more than 5 years ago, but her invisible presence Molly felt almost constantly. In the most difficult moments of life, she mentally turned to the only native person, and the image of her mother immediately appeared in front of her eyes. Today, also a deceased parent. Early in the morning, she visited her daughter. She was smiling as always, but the words spoken to her made the girl shudder. "Molly, don't trust those who make sweet promises. Be careful and take care of your son." The young woman pondered over this message from another world. While she was preparing breakfast for herself and her little son, she knew very well that the meaning of these words would be revealed later. It had happened more than once. But the girl never ceased to be amazed at the strange connection with the deceased, the mother, and the surprising truthfulness of her predictions. When it happened for the first time, she thought that on the background of wild stress, she was slowly going crazy to prevent unwanted consequences. Molly recounted verbatim to Wendy the conversations with the calm mother. But the old woman only grinned, "Don't be afraid. It's fate sending you signs through the image of her mother. Such messages should not be ignored." Molly didn't believe the old woman, who was also a very distant relative. "Grandma Wendy, it's all bullshit. I don't believe in all sorts of otherworldly forces and evil doom." Wendy looked at her so that it was her looks. Everything inside went cold. "You don't believe and you laugh in vain. It won't be long before you realize what you've been given this gift for, will you?" Molly laughed again. "Grandmother, do you consider the voices that trouble me a gift?" "Of course I do. After all, everything you hear comes true later. Almost everything. But it seems like pure coincidence to me. Remember, idiot, nothing in this world happens by chance. Everything has a meaning, but not everyone understands it." Grandma Wendy often said strange things. Many people were afraid of her, but they still went to her for help. Molly looked at the picture of Grandma Faith in the antique frame and sighed, "And Mommy left me. And you, Grandma, left without forgiving 6 too. But thank you for not forgetting, visiting nonetheless. I get only good signs from you, and I try to do good myself." Molly did not have time to finish this pleasant thought, because someone insistently knocked on the window, who came so early. The woman rushed to the door, but did not immediately manage with the shield. The knock was repeated to the landlady. She had to ask the early visitor, "Don't bang so loudly. You'll wake up the baby." The request was heard, and the knocking stopped. The young snackar opened the door with difficulty and squeezed into the narrow space. Lucy Guest at once expressed her displeasure. "What are you so long entrenched or hiding? Who in the house from the eyes of strangers?" The visitor looked around, but found nothing suspicious. "I was going to visit you yesterday, but I didn't have time. So many things to do around the house, I have no time for anything. And then there's this damn splinter." The woman nodded at her bandaged palm. "I got it 3 days ago. I thought it was nothing, but it was just a fire burning and twitching inside." Molly asked for a guest. "Aunt Lucy, why don't you sit in the chair and I'll look at your arm?" Lucy lamented about her miserable life. The healer complied with the request, but as soon as the hand sign touched her arm, she cried out, "You be careful, or I might pass out from the pain. I've had that happen to me before when I pulled a tooth. It took half an hour to pump me out." "Aunt Lucy, but I can't treat you if I can't see the wound." "I'm telling you it's a splinter. There's no wound. I'll unwrap the bandage myself." Kukushkin began to remove the bandage, and Molly did not hold back her exclamation when she saw the woman's palm swollen across the wall into her neck. "Aunt Lucy here, already herbs and lotions cannot help. You need to run to a surgeon immediately, or you may lose a limb." The visitor waved her inflamed palm. "What kind of healer are you if you send me to a doctor? I don't take on anything I'm not sure of. In this case, I doubt conservative methods will help you." Lucy swung his sore arm again. "Look, don't act so smart. You've got all these words and you expect me to believe you. You don't know anything, you're only good at twirling your tail. You can't do anything but twirl your tail around and take advantage of other people's fiancés." Molly knew about the character of this woman, but did not think that Aunt Lucy would allow herself such a prank in someone else's house. Trying to keep calm, she asked the guest, "Why did you come to me for help or to humiliate? And please don't yell. I have a small child." But these requests could not stop Lucy. She began to denounce the witch doctor for all her sins. "Who are you to make a remark to me? In the old days, people like you were burned at the stake, and rightly so. Don't mess with the people, you charlatan." And the stranger's indignant cries of the visitors were interrupted by a child's crying. Little Zach jumped out in his pajamas and barefoot. He fought with fear and cried, "Mommy, I'm afraid this Aunt Witch will chase her away instead of apologizing and leaving the stranger's house." Lucy attacked the baby. "It wasn't me. Apparently, boy, it's your mama. Let her tell you who she took you from. You can tell who your daddy is without her confession." Sam Jones, the naked eye can detect further mayhem in your home. Molly couldn't stand it. She went at the visitors with determination, although she was much larger than her in stature. "Aunt Lucy, leave nicely, or I'll have to use force." Lucy backed down, but she didn't give up. "We'll see who's who. I'll tell the police. Let 'em find out what kind of bird you are and what right you have to occupy this house. And I'll inform your superiors. Who are you really? And they'll broom you out of the poultry farm. You'll be sorry you ever messed with me." Before slamming the door, Molly, as calmly as possible, said, "Aunt Lucy, you go to the hospital right now. I hear there's a new surgeon there. They say he's very experienced." Instead of thanking her for the sound advice, Lucy launched a stone to slam all the doors shut. Then she muttered curses and headed out. Zach sobbed some more. Molly did her best to calm the baby. She pressed her son to her breast and whispered, "Don't be afraid. Sonny, we are with you. I won't give you to anyone." The mother's caress had a calming effect, and Zach became quiet. Molly continued to rock the baby in her arms, remembering how her mother always found the right words when children's troubles happened to her. Tears did not flow from her eyes. And the young woman silently whispered, "Mommy, how bad it is that you are not with me. We are all alone in this world." In her short life, Molly had experienced loneliness in all its forms. Her first conscious thoughts were related to this unpleasant feeling. But at an early age, she didn't understand why her daddy didn't want to play with her. When her mother was at work, at any request of the girl, the head of the Edwards family rudely replied, "I have no time to entertain you. You have plenty of toys. Go to your room." If Molly did not obey her father's orders, he would push her out the door. When William was particularly angry, he could miscalculate his strength, and his rough touches left bruises on the girl's arms. One day, the mother was worried sick when she saw purple spots on her daughter's hands. "Molly, where did you get that?" The daughter immediately blurted out, "Daddy did it to me." I didn't listen to him, and he got angry when he heard the girl's answer. William was furious. "Molly, who taught you to lie?" Such a little girl is already lying, noticing the wary look of his wife. The man began to explain to her excitedly. "Betty, who do you believe me, or this dog? You know very well that little children are prone to lying. Molly is an overly active little girl and is always bruising herself during her playtime." Betty replied not right away. "See, I might have believed your version if it weren't for one thing: children are more likely to have bruises on their feet. And there are blue spots on the shoulders and arms. And it's hematoma-like in nature. It's not hard to figure out how they got there." Molly remembers well how, at these words of her mother, the father again threw her an angry look. But at the same time, he faintly asked her daughter, "Tell Mommy it's not true. Have I ever hurt you?" The man's question went unanswered because Molly ran off to her room. Already at the age of 5, she knew very well how an honest answer could turn out for her. She drew patterns on the horse glass with her finger until late at night and dreamed of a very different life. Betty, after that egregious incident, also drew the appropriate conclusions. She placed her daughter with friends or acquaintances for the time she was on duty. William did not object to this change, and when Molly returned home, he wryly remarked, "Ours is back. And how is it at other people's aunts' houses?" "Better than at home with Daddy, I guess." Although the girl didn't like the nomadic lifestyle, she answered her father's questions with an affirmative nod of her head. From then on, she stopped seeing William as Molly's father and protector, avoided talking to him at all costs, and tried not to be alone with a man from whom undisguised hatred emanated. Despite the differences between the spouses, the Edwards family was considered exemplary because in those years, above all valued above all material well-being. Neighbors, acquaintances openly envied the couple. Grandmothers in the evenings on the bench at the entrance discussed. Such good, positive people. Both doctors get a decent salary. They have a car. The apartment is also richly furnished. What else do you need for a happy life? This is a question Betty has not found an answer to for many years. Indeed, professionally, she and her husband were doing quite well. She was the head of the environmental department at the city hospital, while her husband held a senior position in a private clinic. His father, who had been a prominent financial official under the socialist system, had provided him with a warm place. The Edwards family was not in need either, although there was no extra money. But for all the apparent prosperity was not the main component of love. Betty and William studied at the same institute, but in different departments. What happens in a student environment? The young people first developed a friendly relationship. Betty was courted by William's friend, who then had an accident. In the most difficult moments, William gave the girl a friendly shoulder. "Betty, you can always count on me. You've lost a loved one, and I've lost my best friend. It seems to me that together you and I will be able to bear this loss more easily." The girl gratefully accepted the guy's words. But their relationship very soon ceased to be friendly. William told the girl Betty more and more insistently every day that you should let go of the past. You can't get your old love back, and you shouldn't dwell on it. You're a young, beautiful woman, and I think it's stupid to condemn yourself to loneliness. Believe me, 5 years will pass, and you will regret that you missed the opportunity to be happy. William made speeches like that almost every day, and Betty gave in. But there was one more thing that made her give in to the guy's entreaties. Soon after the tragic death of her fiancé, she realized that she was expecting a child. But William Edwards reacted positively to this fact. He assured the girl Vetui, "I consider it my duty to take care of my best friend's child. So the sooner you and I formalize the relationship, the better it will be for all of us." This confession completely reassured the girl, and she agreed to become William's wife. But apparently, the groom did not hold back and told his father that his young wife was expecting a child from another man. Edwards Sr. was furious, and without choosing words, began to reproach his son. Only a complete idiot could come up with such an idea. Have you seen any conscientious movies? Voluntarily take responsibility for someone else's child? Well, I'll tell you straight, son, once you've got it on your shoulders, you carry that burden until you get tired of it. But in my house, William has decided to correct his father. Betty's expecting a girl. I don't care. A girl or a boy. I do not wish to see her child in my home and will never acknowledge it. Of course, Molly was not privy to the backstory of its birth, but she did not have the opportunity to learn of her grandparents' love, as her father's parents ignored the fact of its very existence. William himself subsequently repudiated the commitment he had, in a burst of the kindest affection, willingly made before she was born. The truth that she was not his own daughter, Molly learned only after the death of her mother. Betty kept this family secret until her last breath. The sudden departure of her mother was a terrible blow to Molly. After all, Betty had never complained about her health. She ran in the mornings, and on weekends, she did not visit the swimming pool. This resilient woman seemed to have endless energy. Even William often joked about it. "Betty, I'm sorry, but I often think there's a perpetual motion machine inside you. I'm completely exhausted by lunchtime, and there's no mistaking you." On such remarks, Molly's mother answered simply, "William, unlike you, I cannot relax, so I try to always be in tone." The smile disappeared from the woman's face as she added thoughtfully, "It's true that I've been having a lot of headaches lately. The girls took my blood pressure, and it's higher than normal." Molly did not hold back, despite William's presence. "Mom, is it time for you to take a break? You should go to a resort near the sea and have a good rest." The head of the family, with unconcealed irony, exclaimed, "Dreams in you are weakness." "Molly, do you believe in what you're suggesting? Who will let your mom go to this resort? I mean, she's indispensable. She's used to pulling the whole department." Daughter and mother exchanged understanding glances and did not enter into an argument. They knew that such verbal altercations most often end in a heated scandal with insults. Molly locked herself in her room, immersed in reading notes. She too decided to devote herself to medicine, as her mother, and studied at the 3rd year of medical university. That momentous conversation in the kitchen was soon forgotten. Only later, when Mom was gone, in the memory involuntarily surfaced moments that Molly had not given importance to before. Subsequently, the girl repeatedly chastised herself for inattention. The alarm beacon didn't work, and when her mother had to call an ambulance to the house, the woman's well-being deteriorated suddenly. She turned pale and grabbed the back of a chair. "Daughter, I don't feel so good." "Dial 03. The emergency team arrived just 5 minutes later. The doctor scolded Veta for not caring about her health, and then gave her an injection. After that, the mother felt much better. The head of the household was not at home at the time. Betty asked her daughter not to say anything to him. "Daughter, your mother was just a little tired. So my blood pressure's skyrocketing. Tomorrow morning I'll call the chief and take a couple of days off." But in the morning, the woman forgot her intention and flew to work. Molly tried to stop her. "Mommy, you were really sick yesterday and you promised to stay home." Betty looked at her watch and answered on the run, "Daughter, let's talk about it later. I'm feeling pretty well today. Wednesday is my surgery day, so I can't just take a vacation. You're a medical student, so you should know that your duty to your patients is more important than a minor ailment." Molly was at a lecture when the cell phone in her jacket pocket. Seeing an unfamiliar number, she felt very anxious and asked to get off. An unfamiliar female voice and dryly informed Molly, "Betty, I've gotten sick after surgery. She's in intensive care now. She's having a stroke. But don't worry. Our doctors will do everything they can." Without hearing the optimistic message, Molly, the head nurse of the environmental unit, ran to the hospital. She spent 3 days in front of the ICU doors, believing in the medic's prognosis. But despite the efforts of the best specialists, Betty passed away without regaining consciousness. She was only 43 years old. Everything that followed was a blur. On the day of her mother's funeral, it was raining heavily, so the ceremony was held in a crumpled manner without any heartwarming speeches. After the cemetery, everyone went to the restaurant, where William decided to organize a wake. Molly refused to take part in this obligatory meal, which caused the anger of her father. And then she decided to stand out. "Think what people will say if you don't show up at the wake." The girl replied in a colorless voice, "I can't get my mom back anyway. I can't eat and drink and watch others fill their wombs. You see, I can't." William swore profanely, then said he didn't want to tell you on a day like this, but you asked for it. "I'm sick of your antics, and I'm not going to put up with them from now on. Mother's gone. You can't count on me." The meaning of these parental words came to the girl later, when she discovered that the refrigerator was completely empty. When her father came home, she told him that they had nothing left but pasta. William looked at her as if he was seeing her for the first time. "Did you forget? I warned you that it's every man for himself now. How old are you? Is that right? Soon to be 20. Mature enough to earn your own food." Molly was stunned by her father's words. "Dad, I have to get my diploma. Go ahead. I don't forbid you, but I don't intend to support you." The man hesitated for a few seconds, and then, looking directly at the girl, in the eyes said, "Mother did not tell you. I didn't want to spoil family relations. The thing is, I'm not your father in the sense of biological connection. Your mom got pregnant by another man who left her. I married her out of pity." It was the second blow that completely broke the young girl. All night she cried at the window, no longer hoping for help. The next morning, Molly did not go to the university because she had to look for a livelihood. She spent several days looking for a suitable job, but found nothing. All the following days were like a terrible dream. Molly woke up in the morning and went to the kitchen to prepare some food from the leftovers, but she quickly ran out of pasta and cereals. There was nothing to satisfy her hunger. This black day just coincided with the day after the funeral of her mother, because she had no one to consult with. The girl went to the cemetery, where she spent the whole day until the evening. She went home only after an old woman who passed by shook her head in sadness. "Grandfather by evening and go home." The deceased don't like to be disturbed at a time like this. Molly thanked the woman and left the cemetery. But another shock awaited her at home. As soon as she opened the apartment door, she saw a strange woman in the hallway wearing her mom's slippers on her feet. Molly's eyes went black, and she screamed, "Get out of here. Don't you dare touch my mom's things." The woman was frightened. From the kitchen came William's voice. "Molly, calm down. I warned you the other day that things would be different in this apartment now. In fact, although you are registered here, you have no rights to this apartment because you are not a blood relative." The man appeared in the hallway with a frying pan in his hands. "But I'm not chasing you away yet. Though things may change if you show your true self, Molly immediately arose. Edwards continued, and now we can move on to introductions. This is Vanessa, my colleague. Please love and welcome. Dinner is almost ready. I hope you haven't forgotten that today is the 9th day. I haven't forgotten. I was at the cemetery. Molly wanted to refuse dinner, but hunger took over and she went to the kitchen. When Edwards graciously invited her to the table, she did not listen to what he was talking about with his colleague, because her thoughts were occupied with solving one question: how to go on living. After the final dinner, William went to see Vanessa off. Molly went to her room, the worries of the last days and her nervous system, and the girl felt incredibly tired. She did not notice how she fell into a heavy, restless sleep. It was then that she had her first dream. Molly's mother did not remember what the late mother said, but in the morning she felt relieved. It was as if she had recovered from a long illness. Another event happened that day that would later change her life. She decided to go out in the morning to look for a job. She was immediately lucky. At the bus stop, she noticed an advertisement that attracted her. A day caregiver for a paralyzed woman was needed. Molly tore off a piece of paper with a phone and immediately dialed the number listed there. She was answered by a young man. Yes, we urgently need a caregiver, preferably with a medical degree. If you meet these 2 requirements, come on over. The man dictated her address and she was about to set off, but accidentally pushed the woman to wait at the bus stop for her bus. Molly hastily apologized, and at that moment she heard someone's voice. This woman is about to back up and get hit by the bus. Help her. Before Molly knew it, the woman she had accidentally hit recently was rushing forward. But she didn't realize her strength. Molly managed to pick her up as she fell. The old lady was in shock. I could have been hit by a car. Thank you, Molly. You saved me. Let me thank you. The woman went through her purse, but Molly absolutely refused to take her money. Good deeds don't require payment. It's not nice that I helped you out of trouble. In high spirits, she went to the address, where she was met by the owner of a pleasant baritone. He helped Molly to take off her cloak, and only then held out his hand to Martin. Molly gave her name. The landlord led her deep into the apartment. The 3 of us live in this big apartment. I have a purely female company, so it is me who has to solve all the problems. My grandmother Lola needs care. My mother and I not so long ago took her from the village, because there she was alone. But apparently, the change of residence did not go in favor of my grandmother. She decided to put us in order, but forgot about her age. As a result of a fall from a stepladder, she suffered a concussion. I don't know much about medicine, but after that injury, Grandma's legs gave out. Her hands are fine, and her speech is almost completely recovered. But she can't walk. Molly assured the young man I can handle it, although I do not have a diploma yet, but with the duties of a caregiver will not be a problem. I'm in my 3rd year of college, but at the moment I have a difficult life situation, so I had to leave the university for the time being. Martin listened attentively to the girl and suggested that Molly explain the reasons for your difficult situation. You don't have to, especially if you find it difficult to talk about it. Martin smiled and pointed to the door in front of which they had stopped. In this room is your future patient. Come in. Moore is looking forward to seeing his assistant. She's very sociable. Lola greeted Molly with a charming smile. What a cute little girl. I promise I won't be cranky and will do everything you tell me to do. My first day as a caregiver flew by. Martin's grandmother was not at all shy of the new person. She was happy to share her memories with Molly and generally acted as if she had known her for a long time. When Molly returned home, she remembered the day's incident at the bus stop and whispered in horror, "How did I not realize it was Mom's voice? Am I really going crazy?" Fear crept into Molly's heart, and she even thought about going to a specialist about the strange voices. But then she changed her mind. Basically, I don't mind the voices. And if I go to a psychiatrist, I may be placed in a closed institution. It's probably just a temporary disorder, and it appeared against the background of severe stress. The most important thing now is to be able to earn a living. With this optimistic thought, the girl fell asleep after the first working day. Soon Molly regained her former confidence and was happy to wake up in the morning. She hurried to her patient, and they spent the whole day talking. Martin met Molly in the morning and walked her to the bus stop in the evening. He didn't like to talk about himself. Only once he confessed to Grandma that I had wonderful children. But with my mother, we don't have a good relationship. She's always trying to impose things on me that contradict my principles. You know, when I was a child, I dreamed of becoming an adult as soon as possible, to get rid of my mother and their moralizing with Martin. Molly felt free and at ease. She noticed that the young man was also showing interest. Many times the girl caught his long gaze, and it is a mutual sympathy. It did not escape the keen eye. "Lola, you are such a handsome couple. I look at you and can't help but admire you. It's been a month." Molly's ward began to sit up with her help and then stood on her feet. The old woman considered her healing a miracle. "You got me back on my feet. I didn't believe I could walk anymore, but when you appeared, I felt strong. Just the touch of your hand helps." Molly, it was nice to hear the old lady say that, but she didn't pay much attention to it. Meanwhile, her relationship with Martin became more romantic. The young man began to give her flowers. Once he invited her to the movies. After the session, they walked along the waterfront, and Martin uncertainly suggested, "Molly, you could live with us? It would be more convenient for everyone." The girl doubted the correctness of such a decision. "How would your mom feel about it? Are you sure that she will like the constant presence of a stranger in the apartment?" "Honestly, I don't know. She's a very unpredictable person, and she's a little unpredictable." "Then don't make her angry. By the way, she's due back from a business trip any day now. It was her idea to hire a nurse for Grandma. I was totally against it at first, and now? Now I'm glad I listened to Mother. But that's probably the only positive example." Lissa showed up unannounced. Molly was in the bathroom, when she heard strange footsteps in the hallway. She shouted loudly to Martin, "We're having a water treatment. Don't come in yet." But the door swung open. "Who's that? Who's making such a racket in here?" Lola answered. "Oh, the traveler's here, and she's not happy as usual. Or a black cat crossed your path on the way home." "Mom, are you always joking?" Lisa went into the room and kissed her mother. Lola was touched by his daughter's attention. "Martin and I have been waiting for you. He had to sit with me for almost 2 weeks, and then he came to us through an ad. This beautiful girl is here. Her name is Molly. She forgot we were going to hire a caregiver," the old lady mumbled. "Now I see who has a short memory." Although at first Lisa had treated the young caregiver with ostentatious coolness. Over time, their relationship warmed. Martin's mother was particularly impressed by the fact that one day during dinner, Molly confidently told Lisa, "You should not put on pickles because you have diseased kidneys." If I'm not mistaken, the woman dropped the cutlery from her hands and stared at the girl. "How do you know about my kidneys?" Molly made an uncertain gesture with her hand. But she did not answer the question. She realized how her story would be received by the voice. But the hostess was struck by the girl's abilities. She wanted further proof. For this purpose, Lisa invited her friends. The woman even thought of a suitable reason to drink tea in pleasant company. Molly felt uncomfortable surrounded by status ladies and wanted to leave the room of the hostess. But Lisa asked her to. "Molly is scanning my girls. Tell me, what are their hidden ailments?" The girl was dumbfounded. "And I'll tell you later." Well, she hurried to her ward's room and took a long time to come to her senses. The old woman noticed that the girl was distraught. "Molly, what's wrong? Or were you offended by a close call?" "No, everything is fine." Soon the hostess escorted the guests and looked into Lola's room. "Molly, I need to talk to you in confidence." The girl realized that Lisa would ask her for information about the hidden ailments of her friends. But there was nowhere to go. So she told her that one woman had no health problems, just a little nervous. "Second, in Molly's opinion, you should get a checkup right away. There's something wrong with her heart. There may be a congenital defect that hasn't been detected yet. It's been a few days." I meet Molly in the hallway in the morning, and the landlady mumbles, "Yes, your prognosis has been confirmed. There is indeed a hidden defect. That's just amazing. Tell me, how do you manage to see what doctors can't see?" The girl didn't know what to answer and only shrugged her shoulders. Martin's mother continued to express admiration for the girl's talent. You can make money on it. Such practices are in trend today. Thank you, Lisa, for your advice. But my plans do not include shamanism. The hostess shook her lips unhappily. Don't be so sure. Maiden, don't you know what lies ahead? It is possible that your abilities will help you survive one day. Surprisingly, the woman's words proved prophetic. One day, Molly came home, but could not open the door of her apartment because the key did not want to enter the keyhole. The girl threw with irritation. What nonsense, and squeezed the bell button with force. The door was opened by an old acquaintance, Vanessa. She also wrinkled her nose. It's you, Molly. We decided to change the lock. There's a lot of shady people hanging around the entryway. The girl tried to mentally calm herself down, although inside the volcano was rolling without saying a word. She went to her room, but it was a shambles. Molly shouted, "What is this?" Edwards appeared from the bathroom. He wore his robe open, but he wasn't even embarrassed to see his stepdaughter. "Our gypsy has arrived." "What are we yelling?" Molly said. "My room. Why is it such a mess? And why did you change the lock?" William was pleased with the result of his actions, because he managed to break the resistance of this stubborn girl. He'd shown her who was boss in this apartment. Now it remains to enjoy his victory. The man gritted his teeth. "This is no longer your room. My wife Vanessa will now be in charge of this apartment." Molly felt her breath catching. She said in a low voice, "Daddy, how are you? After all, it's only been 3 months since Mom died." Edwards laughed in her face. "I don't care about convention, and don't call me Dad. I hope you're not so dumb that you don't realize you have nothing more to do in this apartment." Vanessa shifted her gaze fearfully from Molly to William. Her well-groomed face was contorted in a grimace of fear. At the peak of passion, Molly again heard her mother's voice, which predicted the impostor's doom. In a ringing voice, she said, "You rejoiced too soon. Mr. Edwards, it is written on your fate to be an eternal widower and your days. You'll end up in an asylum for the mentally ill. Get out of here, witch." William clenched his fists and moved on the girl, but Molly managed to get Yurka out through the open door. About an hour she wandered around the city and only then decided to call Magtip. The young man listened to her and firmly said, "Do not even think. Come to us." There was nowhere to go, and Molly accepted the young man's offer. She did not refuse Magtipu when he made her a marriage proposal. Soon the young people signed and life began to improve little by little. But despite her unique abilities, the girl did not know that the most difficult tests were ahead of her. Zach was cranky in the morning, so Molly was worried about the state of health of her son. Over these few years, she had learned not only to identify diseases almost without error, but also to select the most effective ways of healing. The young woman stretched out her hands and to the mother of little fancies, "Show me where you have a pain." The boy touched his forehead and hummed. Molly touched her lips to the baby's head. "Oh, I think we've forgiven it all a little bit, because Zach doesn't listen to Mommy. When it's cold outside, you have to wear a hat. Don't you like hats? That's okay. Now Mommy will give you milk with honey and the cold will run away." The little boy asked in surprise. "It will run away and hide, like that aunt who came to see us yesterday." "Son, are you confused? No one came to our house yesterday." The boy was stubbornly insistent. "My aunt came, and I saw her from the window. She was hiding over there." The boy pointed to the barn. "I wanted to tell her it was wrong to peek, but I couldn't, because she ran away." Molly pulled her son close to her and smacked his hot forehead again. "You imagined all this because you're sick. Don't worry, we won't let anyone in with you." The boy echoed, "We won't let anyone in." The young mother went to the kitchen to prepare a warm drink for the child. But at that moment, a shadow flashed outside the window, and Zach shrieked, "Mommy, she's here again." Molly jumped outside and looked around. She clearly felt the presence of a stranger. Grabbing a pitchfork in her hands, the woman went to the barn. "Who's hiding in there? You better come out, or I might hurt unintentionally." For persuasiveness, Molly shook the pitchfork from the yellowed thickets and weeds. A woman's voice was heard. First, a woman's head emerged from the grass, then the observant fully marked out in space. Molly exclaimed, "Julia Jones." What are you doing here, and why are you hiding in my yard?" The young woman began to grow diligently. "Hide up the ringleaders. It's the elderly blades of grass wanted to see the witch doctor." Jacob led the space of the yard perplexed look. And what's so interesting? Uninvited guests desperately waved her hand. "I'm not interested in your houses. I wanted to look at the boy. Does he really look like my Sam?" "What are you talking about?" Molly realized that Lucy had spread the gossip around the village. She wasn't going to justify herself to that poor woman. A husband who never missed a woman's skirt. Jones continued to rub it in, and the witch doctor looked at her piercingly, minting every word. "My son has a father, and your Sam has nothing to do with his birth." Julia tried to object, but he came to see you several times. "How did you just move in with the woman of faith?" "That's right, but I'm not the one who treated your husband." "How can you blindly believe rumors like that? You're an educated woman, and it's not hard to calculate. When I moved here and when I had Zach, it didn't prove anything." Now doctors are nursing premature babies, Molly impatiently interrupted Julia. "My son was born overweight, so all your suspicions are unfounded." Chasing Lucy and other gossip. "Okay, Julia, I don't have time for this." But Jones wasn't going to leave. "Show me your boy, I want to make sure." This demand angered the young mother. "This isn't a circus or a museum to show off. My child is sick, and I'm not going to disturb him. Go home, Julia, don't make me go to extreme measures." Jones reluctantly headed for the entrance. She turned around several times before leaving the stranger's yard. Molly noticed the woman's bloodless lips moving. She thought regretfully, "It must be clinging to me. And why are people willing to believe any word spoken? Why won't they trust the voice of reason?" After the bread drink, Zach felt better and fell asleep. Molly sat beside the crib, her son immersed in his thoughts. "My little boy, how like your father are you? But I don't want you to turn out to be a scoundrel like him." Molly's marital bliss lasted only 2 months. After their modest wedding with Martin unexpectedly died Lola, and her husband's mother drastically changed her attitude to the young daughter-in-law Lisa. She didn't hesitate to air her grievances with the girl. "It's your fault. Did not save my mommy from death. Left a soothsayer. You're a liar, not a healer." The woman usually made such accusations when Martin wasn't at home. She was afraid of her son's reaction and tried to keep her emotions in check. But everything changed after Martin went on a long business trip. Before he left, he reassured his young wife, Molly. "I'll be gone for a month or 2. Our company is opening a branch in the Sverdlovsk region, and my team will have to provide the technical part. But we have all experienced specialists who are real pros, so we'll manage." In a minimum of time, the young woman had a bad feeling and asked her husband, Martin, "Can't you stay? My heart is troubled." He hugged her affectionately. "Don't fill your head with bad thoughts. We'll be fine, and you can call me anytime." "I will. I'll take you at your word. I'll bore you with my calls every day." The very next day, she dialed her husband's number, but he didn't answer. For a whole week, the young woman tried to contact Martin, but heard only the soulless voice of the answering machine. "Call her out. Call back later." Then she was told that such a number did not exist at all. She could only hope that Martin would call her himself. But as the days went by, her cell phone gave no sign of life except total incomprehension. What had happened to Martin? Worrying was her mother-in-law's attitude. She became irritable and rebuked her daughter-in-law for the slightest misstep. Subsequently, Martin's mother began to ignore her daughter-in-law's presence. As soon as Molly showed up in the kitchen, Lisa would defiantly leave, emphasizing with her behavior that she did not want to talk to her. This went on for about a week. Molly sensed that a storm was brewing, and she wasn't wrong. One evening, Lisa didn't come home in an agitated state, and from the doorstep began to shout, "Molly, where are you? Come here. There is a serious conversation." The girl had to obey her mother-in-law's demand. She went out into the hallway and immediately smelled the odor of booze. This fact shocked the girl, because Lisa was very careful about her health. She always refused wine even on holidays. Noticing that the daughter-in-law wrinkled Mother Martin, critically remarked that she did not like it. "I don't like a lot of things either, but I have to put up with it." For example, your presence in this house pisses me off. Tell me how long you're going to sit here waiting for who knows what. Lisa, why are you doing this? I'm waiting for Martin. He's my lawfully wedded husband. The woman burst out laughing. He had a platoon of wives like that before him. Do you really believe in fairy tales? My son is not your type. That's not the kind of wife he wants. Let him decide what kind of wife he wants. The mother-in-law came so close that the girl felt her breath on her face. Listen to me, beautiful. Has it not yet reached your native brains that Martin regrets his hasty wife, and that's why he doesn't answer you? By the way, he called me the day before yesterday. Told me he's gonna be delayed another month. Molly held her breath. Lisa, he asked about me. He did. He wondered if you moved out of this apartment yet. I'd really like to hear the answer to that question too, because your presence in this house really annoys me. What are you here for, anyway? Your services are not needed. And if you're going to live on someone else's dime, that's not gonna work. So find an apartment. And the sooner you do it, the better. I'll even give you some money. Given your hopeless situation, go to your relatives. After all, you have aunties and grandmothers. Lisa took out 2 bills of the highest denomination. I hope you and I understand each other. There was a hammer pounding in her head, and the sound made her very dizzy. Molly began to hastily gather her things. Before her eyes flashed the face of her mother-in-law, distorted with hatred, and in her ears those nasty dots. Her words sounded, "Look for an apartment. That's not the kind of wife my son needs." Martin called to me, smearing tears and despair on her cheeks. A young woman whispered to her. He called me because he was afraid, and I was such a knave fool. I wanted to make them happy with the news that we were having a baby. Molly had only recently found out she was pregnant, but she had been hesitant to tell her mother-in-law. It's okay, I'll be fine on my own. We don't need anyone. In that critical situation, she felt for the first time united with her unborn child. Trying not to make any noise, she left her husband's apartment and headed for the train station. She already knew that she would buy a ticket to Native Village. Wendy wouldn't chase me away. I have nowhere else to go. Just the day after Molly arrived at the village across the creek, news spread throughout the neighborhood that a distant relative had settled in. Wendy treated people with herbs, but she selected the formulas based solely on the complaints of visitors. The old lady's granddaughter had different diagnostic methods. Molly could identify a diseased organ with a touch of her hand. Over time, she learned to control her unique abilities and the accuracy of her diagnosis. Amazed even medics, who sometimes turned to her for help. But the popularity of the young witch doctor did not many became across the throat. Questionable activities of a young woman attracted the attention and representatives of law enforcement. One day, Molly visited the district police officer and advised you to get a job, because people are different. They say I have no complaints against you. Live as you like, but I have to respond to complaints. Go to the poultry farm. There's always a shortage of labor there. Molly thanked the district officer for his advice and was soon on the payroll. While Wendy was alive, she worked in shifts. But after the death of a relative, the question of where to put the child came up. And here again, kind people helped. The company allocated a place in a kindergarten for a single mom. It remained only to rejoice in life. Envious, ill-wishers have already hatched a plan of revenge. Strangers who dared to break the established order in their promised corner. No sooner had Julia Jones left the house. The healer, as she noticed not in the distance painfully familiar male figure out of rage. The woman whispered, "Oh, you ghastly," to this Vedimi poured, "but nothing, I'll arrange you." Love comforts together will be on a hot griddle tumbling, trying not to give away his presence. My jealousy is unbearable. Woman sneaked into her house. The children rushed to her with questions. Mom, where have you been? Dad came to ask for you, and we don't know what to say. Julia automatically asked her daughter, and where is Daddy now? Where is he? He went to work. He just left without waiting for you. His car broke down. It needs to be repaired. I made him some sandwiches because Daddy said he'd be late. The woman listened to her daughter, and in her head a plan of revenge was already brewing. She muttered, "It's a good thing Daddy will be back late." The daughter looked at her mother in surprise. "Mom, you seem strange today. You're scolding Daddy for being in the workshops all day, but you're saying it's a good thing." Julia whispered at her daughter and went about her chores. She could hardly wait until evening when it was quite dark. The woman slipped out of the house. She brought her bag with her, which she tried to carry very carefully. She stepped carefully past the Negros houses and disappeared into the night. All day long, Molly had not gotten the visits of Julia Jones out of her mind either. "I still don't understand why that woman came. And she was behaving strangely. Can jealousy turn a mother of two into such a hunted creature? It's just an unsubstantiated rumor. I've only seen that Sam a few times, and that was in public after dinner. A woman was about to do laundry, but the old lady next door came in. 'Molly, baby, look at my leg. You've got eyes like x-rays.' The old woman was leaning on a crooked branch and barely had a ferret, so she sat her down on a stool. 'And where did you get it?' The old woman began to wail. 'She's getting old. Her eyes are failing. She was doing her chores at home. Diana hit a corner. It hurts like hell. I wish it wasn't broken. I'd be dead.' Kelly, like many old people in the village, had no relatives. Well, they had relatives, but they lived far away. Therefore, any illness, or even a minor injury for such people seemed a disaster. The healer tried to calm the grandmother. 'You still live to 100 years. You don't have a fracture, but you were wrong. I'm going to give you a little treatment.' Molly took a jar of herbal ointment out of the cupboard and applied the composition liberally to the bruised long areas. Then she put a bandage on her leg. 'That's it. You'll feel better soon.' Kelly began to thank the woman. 'You have a good heart to help people. God bless you.' The old woman took a jar of ointment and, leaning on a stick, headed for the entrance. 'Kelly, let me walk you out.' Molly drove her patient almost to the house and then returned. Until late in the afternoon, she did her housework. The uneasiness that had appeared in the afternoon did not go away. This unpleasant feeling only grew stronger by the minute. And the woman tried to understand the reason for its appearance, but her thoughts each time returned to the morning incident. She put Zach to bed and was about to go to bed herself. Suddenly, the image of her mother appeared very clearly before her eyes. 'Don't sleep, daughter. You can't sleep.' Molly ran her hands over her face, as if trying to remove the obsession, but it didn't help. Then the woman went to the window. She wanted to open the window a little to let in some fresh air, but at that moment, a column of flame erupted from the side. Not yet realizing what had happened, the young woman rushed to the crib. She managed to jump out into the street when Baba Faith's flimsy house was completely engulfed in flames. Zach cradled her mother's skinny body. 'Mommy, I'm scared.' 'Don't be afraid, son, I'm with you.' Instead of fire people ran away, but mostly it was old people who couldn't help. When the firemen arrived, the home village was just a smoking ruin. Molly stood at a loss, not knowing what to do. Elderly Gawkers had already managed to scatter to their homes, and no one cared about the young mother with a baby in her arms. She tucked her son into the blanket and wandered off to meet the dispersing. Mused dawned. Jacob disliked night duty to the point of toothache, but he disliked middle-of-the-night calls even more. This night, he wasn't destined to enjoy pleasant visions either. Because in the morning, the phone was ringing off the hook. It was the duty nurse from the emergency room. 'Jacob, urgently need your consultation.' Jacob grumbled unhappily. 'Is something burning?' 'You couldn't wait until morning.' The girl grinned. 'There was a fire today, but not at our place. Someone's house burned down across the river, but there were no casualties. Who'd want to come in the middle of the night? A woman from around here. It's a bad situation with her arm.' 'All right, I'll be right there. Get a small or ready just in case.' 'I'm all set.' I could hear a woman crying on the phone. Jacob said in his heart, 'They take it to the extreme and then they cry. What kind of people?' The man quickly dressed and jumped outside. The morning fog completely enveloped the small town. The sight was stunning, but Jacob had no time to admire the beautiful scenery. Duty was calling him. He hurried towards the hospital, not expecting to meet anyone on the deserted street. Suddenly he noticed in the square near the hospital an incomprehensible movement. At first, Jacob wanted to run past this suspicious object that heard a child crying. The man thought with irritation that people can't sleep. They're dragging children with them. He came closer and only then realized that the object of his concern was a young woman with a baby in her arms. Jacob asked if you were in trouble. The voice replied yes. Our house burned down and my son and I are now left on the street. Jacob remembered the conversation with the nurse from the emergency room. So you're the burned out people from across the river? Do you have any acquaintances or relatives? No one, and everything burned down. I didn't even have time to bring my papers. What am I going to do with you? I don't have time to arrange anything for you. The man thought for a second, but then he exclaimed happily, I don't know your name. Sweet young lady, but here's a solution to your problem. I'll give you the keys to the house where I live. It's not far from here, near the store. You'll wait for me. Then we'll figure out what to do together. Unfortunately, I can't spare your time right now because I'm in a hurry to go to surgery. Jacob gave the young woman the keys and headed toward the hospital. Lucy sat on the couch in the emergency room and rocked her growing arm like a child. The woman's condition was worsening by the hour, and the swelling had spread all the way to her shoulder. Lucy was crying her eyes out. Why didn't I listen? She told me the day before yesterday to run to the hospital, and I didn't listen. Now I'm gonna die. In the prime of life, Jacob heard the last words of the woman and cheerfully said, do not even dream. We will not let you die. We will save you now. Lucy tried to rise from the couch, but the wild pain nailed her to the seat. I'm not the one who can't stand my hanging cats anymore. You're the one who's going to cut my arm. Jacob patted the woman on the shoulder. We'll look at your arm first and then decide what to do. Cutting something off isn't a problem, so we'll figure out how to avoid losing it. Hey guys, help a woman to the dressing room. This request was addressed to the duty shift of the emergency room. A young nurse together with an orderly picked up Lucy from both sides, and the patient began to wail even louder. Why didn't I listen? She warned me. Jacob inquired. You're always talking about some kind of witch doctor. If I understand you correctly, you have been treated with folk methods before. No doctor didn't. I had that damn splinter in me over 2 weeks ago. Everything was fine. And then my palm started to swell up and I couldn't save it. I went to a witch doctor across the river. She lives as a nurse, interrupted a patient. Jenya has a house. Bauki Faith this night burned down. Lucy, the palm of her healthy hand covered her mouth. My mother is a woman. Apparently put down the young witch doctor. Jacob is already a little accustomed to the local lingo, and you have suspicions about it? Lucy shook his head. Maybe I do, but I won't. Why are you slandering people for nothing? The nurse noticed. You be right. I have never believed in all sorts of things, and I have never gone to a witch doctor. It's safer and safer to go to a certified specialist. Jacob looked at the girl carefully. You're wrong. You can't deny the possibility of unconventional practices. I too, in my youth, I thought all this quackery. But then myself got into trouble and saved me a local uncle with a tambourine Jacob and removed from the hand Lucy and bandage and shook his head. Oh, you got your arm all messed up. We'll have to operate. Having calmed down, it was. Lucy started wailing loudly again. Doctor, I can't bear the pain. I assure you, you won't even feel it, because we'll give you an injection. Within an hour, the operation was over. Am I alive, or am I dreaming? Jacob was cheering up the patient. It's okay, and you're still on the ground. But you're going to have to stay with us for a few days because there could be complications. We're treating you. Then you'll go home, a promise that soothed the pain-stricken woman. I'd do anything to save my arm. The nurse on duty began to register the patient for inpatient treatment. Jacob looked at his watch. Wow, it's 8:30. Time to go to work. The surgeon was already heading to his department, but suddenly remembered about the girl who had the keys to the house. He asked the nurse, if you don't mind, tell mine that I'll be a little late for half an hour, no more. Of course, Jacob will run home. Have some tea after such a restless night. It is not a sin to rest. Jacob hurried home because he didn't like to be late for work. He didn't consider night duty an excuse, and hoped to be home in time for the general hospital meeting. The door of the house was open, and the man, trying not to make any noise, made his way into the large room. His guests were asleep on the couch, and he was able to get a good look at their facial features. A young woman suddenly gleamed something, and the man shifted his gaze to the nightstand and was stunned. He saw the woman's jewelry, a small pendant in the form of a locket. There was no way this thing was in this girl's possession. Jacob touched the young woman's hand, and Molly opened her eyes with difficulty. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize I'd fallen asleep." The man had already completely mastered himself. "And I just want to ask you one question. Tell me, where did you get this pendant?" The girl said sadly, "It was my mother's jewelry. It's the only thing I have in memory of her." Jacob felt his mouth dry with excitement in his voice. He asked, "Your mom's name by chance Betty?" The girl fluttered her eyelashes in surprise. "Yes, Edward's Betty." He couldn't hold back his emotions any longer. "Edwards. So it was you. So she tricked me then. But why?" Molly looked fearfully at the man, who had his arms wrapped around his head in despair. She did not understand anything, but was afraid to question this man. Terrible fear for herself and her son again. Sticky paws touched her heart. "Perhaps we better leave." Molly began to wake her son. "Zach, wake up, sweetheart." Jacob sank down on the couch without strength. "Oh, you have to leave?" "My daughter, stay here. This is your home now. I have so much to tell you, but I have to get my thoughts together." Jacob had completely forgotten his duty as a doctor. He sat on the couch and could not take his eyes off the night guest who had come into his life so unexpectedly. Zach looked at the adults and didn't understand what was happening to them. He looked at his mother, then at the owner of the house. "You're my grandfather." The stupor fell away. And Jacob confidently answered, "Yes, little boy." He cradled the boy against him and clutched him. Eyes too stingy male tears rolled down his cheeks. But Jacob was not embarrassed by these tears because they were tears of happiness. Episodes from the past often surfaced in Jacob's mind. But for more than a quarter of a century, he had diligently banished them. Once he had already drawn the final line beyond which his past remained. And he never wanted to go back there again. But the appearance of a young witch doctor with a baby made the man change his principles. And for the first time in many years, he allowed himself to return to the place where his youthful dreams and first love remained. With William Edwards. They had been friends since first grade, and this friendship was approved by both boys' parents and teachers. Because Jacob possessed the qualities of a leader, and William tried to imitate him in everything, so their relationship often resembled a competition. But until the time of endless dueling did not tolerate serious disagreements. Only sometimes William would wistfully remark, "Jacob, you're a real lucky man. No matter how hard I try, I can't do it." His comrade answered him everything, because you try to repeat after others, showing your individual qualities, and immediately feel different. Jacob tried to follow his friend's advice, but he still did not succeed. Around the 9th grade, he decided to succeed in another way. He started spreading rumors about him behind his friend's back. When Jacob realized who was the source of the gossip, he gave his friend his first warning. "Look, William, this is not manly. If it happens again, you can forget you have a friend." Edwards was quiet for a while, but jealousy lurked beneath the boy's heart. Despite the fact that relations between friends cooled a little, William also applied to medical school. Surprisingly, but both guys got in at the first go. Jacob took the event with reserve. Edwards, on the other hand, was triumphant. "You and I are destined to be together for life. I can already imagine how you and I will become surgeons and work in a good clinic." Jacob decided to tease his comrade, but district hospitals are not a prospect for an aspiring doctor. "Edwards, I don't get it." Jokes waved 2 hands, did not get burned at once. "This is definitely not for me. My daddy won't let his only son miss out somewhere in the middle of nowhere." Jacob, in a constructive tone, said a real doctor must go through all the stages of formation. Only then can he become a true professional. Although William disagreed, he did not argue with his comrade. The silent man swallowed his resentment when Jacob, not him, had been elected the head of the group at the general meeting. The appearance of a favorite girl in the life of a friend's friend was the most stressful for the jealous. Betty was getting a lot of attention from a lot of guys, but she only let herself be courted by Jacob. William secretly suffered because he also liked this girl. After Jacob started dating Betty, and Jacob was basically left out. Then he remembered the old and already personally proven method of gossip. But having learned from bitter experience, the boy was now acting smarter. He acted very carefully and mostly through third parties. Therefore, it was almost impossible to identify the source. Thanks to the efforts of William at the university, spread rumors that Jacob likes to drink and booze. Such behavior of the university administration could not leave without attention. Jacob was summoned to the dean's office and reprimanded in full form. He was given a warning. Keep in mind, Jacob, one more such signal, and you can take away your documents. No matter how much the guy tried to slander, to justify himself, no one wanted to listen to him. Although he guessed who was the culprit of his troubles, there was no proof. In order to completely eliminate problems in the future, Jacob terminated all relations with Edwards. He even rented a room so that he wouldn't have to face the envious students in the dormitory. But William was not deterred. He decided to come in from the other flank, namely to make his accomplices and his friend's girlfriend. But Betty quickly figured him out. Look, William, you've got the wrong girl. I'm used to believing only the facts, so you're not going to get away with this. Don't waste your time. Do something useful. Take up ballroom dancing or go to the library. No girl had ever humiliated William in such a way, but the narcissistic young man didn't know how to take revenge on those who made him suffer. The opportunity came unexpectedly, approached the end of studies, and every future medic made plans for life. Before receiving their diplomas, the graduates were offered a little work in the organization of the Red Cross. The first to sign up was Edwards. He excitedly told his classmates about the prospects of participating in the mission. Guys, this is a great launching pad. A knowledgeable person assured me that later all participants would be given special certificates. And in general, to visit abroad for free. It's the limit of dreams. Many alumni took the bait. Jacob was one of them. Only he had a very different agenda. He thought the peacekeeping mission would give him a chance to gain useful experience as an aspiring surgeon. When Betty found out Jacob was going to Africa, she was shocked. Jacob, do you realize how serious this is? It's very dangerous. Boyfriend to girlfriend. He won't send us somewhere too hot. I've already found out our group is going to one of the poorest countries. We'll take vaccines and necessary medical supplies there to provide medical care to the people. As soon as I get back, you and I will definitely cut the wedding short. Why didn't you tell me before? I would have gone with you too. There's nothing for girls to do there. So there's still danger, and you're lying to me. Betty, you know there's danger everywhere. Even crossing the road is scary because not everyone follows the rules. There were 17 people in their group, and they put Edwards in charge. This was William's finest hour. He gave out commands left and right, which caused laughter and obscene jokes. Upon arrival at their destination, the future doctors immediately began to work Jacob, and 2 other guys were sent to remote settlements. But they did not reach the place. On the way to the settlement, they were ambushed. One guy was killed, and Jacob was seriously wounded. All the valuable cargo was taken by local bandits. They also tied up the 3rd boy and took him with them. Scraps of their conversations, Jacob realized that the bandits were going to get a ransom for the prisoner. That terrible day he remembered for the rest of his life. He was bleeding on the road with no hope of rescue. Gathering his last strength, Jacob gave himself first aid, which helped to stop the bleeding. After that, he lost consciousness. He woke up in a dwelling resembling a tent. People were discussing quietly and pointing at him. Soon a short man in brightly colored rags jumped up. He began to examine Jacob's wound and at the same time loudly faltered his tongue. The boy realized that his affairs were not good at all. After examining the local shaman, Jacob ate some potions, and he fell into unconsciousness. He lost track of the days, so he did not know how much time had passed since his disappearance. When he became quite well, 2 men from the tribe put him on some kind of battery and took him to the nearest town. There he learned that he had been a guest of the local tribe for 3 whole months. He was also told that he had been presumed dead for all those months. It was a real shock. Jacob was afraid to even imagine the upcoming meeting with his fiancée. But everything turned out to be obscenely trivial. Betty did not faint, but only slightly pale. And then the most amazing thing happened. His fiancée was not happy, but on the contrary, began to reproach him that he had not found a way to inform her that he was alive and well. "And I believed you, and you turned out to be like this." She didn't get a chance to say who he really was. Because the final scene was the appearance of William Edwards. Jacob pulled his eyes out. "What are you doing here?" William gave him a friendly pat on the shoulder. "I'm glad you're alive. Honestly, very glad. But sorry, old boy, things have changed while you've been traveling in Africa. Betty and I got married last week. It was a beautiful wedding. Too bad you didn't get a chance to have any fun." Jacob didn't remember how he got to the apartment he and Betty had rented before the upcoming wedding. His thoughts were all jumbled up in his head. And at that moment, he wanted more than anything to drink himself into unconsciousness. The only person who was willing to give him a shoulder to lean on was Andrew. "Hang in there, Jacob. You are a man and must be ready for any trials." The next day, Jacob left town, where his first love and his dashed hopes for happiness remained. Molly looked at the man who was telling her such incredible things. "I gave this pendant to your mother after our first serious, if I may say so, meeting. The only thing I don't understand is, why didn't she tell me?" Molly shook her head. "What makes you so sure I'm not William's daughter?" Jacob found the strength to laugh. "I'll show you one picture now, and you'll understand everything yourself." He put Zach, who had already climbed into his lap, on the floor and opened the closet. He searched for something for a long time, finally handed her the picture. Zach looked in and smiled. "You poked your finger and said, 'That's me, Mom,' when we took the picture. And that's the jacket I don't remember." Molly was afraid to believe it. She could feel the tears coming out of her eyes. "So we are not alone in this world, that we have someone else." Jacob smiled. "Not just anyone, my father and grandfather. By the way, quite a successful surgeon at your hospital." Molly looked at him confused. "What are we all going to do now?" Jacob looked at his watch. "So that's how I'm going to work. I'm sorry to leave you, but now we'll definitely have time to talk. Then I'll take some time off, and we'll be sure to get back to the paperwork and the fire investigation. Anything you can find here is at your disposal. You don't miss me, do you? I'll try to get out in time." He moved toward the door, then stopped, smiled. "I have a very strange feeling right now. I'm basically all alone in this world already. And now I have a family. It's so unusual, so strange, but very joyful." Jacob came out Molly, spinning around the house and holding Zach in her arms. "Zach, we have a daddy, and you have a grandfather. You know, he didn't leave anyone behind. It was all this one." Molly furrowed her brow. She already knew that William's new wife had been hit by a car, and now her ex-father was grooming a new woman. But nothing, as long as the rope didn't twist. That voice forced. Molly grinned. Her mom had never fooled her. By some coincidence. In the afternoon, the chief of the local police department had been admitted with a trivial appendicitis. He kept wiping sweat from his forehead. Jacob asked, "Why are you so nervous?" "By virtue of your profession, it seems to me that you have come face to face with criminals more than once." The man grinned unhappily. "Jacob, I know what to expect from a criminal. I can anticipate what's going to happen. But I'll be sleeping here, if I understand correctly. So I won't be able to influence the course of events." Jacob looked at him with interest. "That's an interesting point of view. But you can't be so distrustful of those around you. Maybe that's what I learned there." Jacob immediately understood what the man was talking about. "But if you have more trust." "I was there too, but not for long. Our supply train was ambushed. One doctor was killed. I was badly wounded, so the bandits assumed I was dead. But they took one young doctor kid with them. I guess they wanted a ransom. I never found out anything about him. They just told me not to go where I didn't want to go." The chief of police held out his hand. "Leo, believe it or not. But I feel a lot better now. I trust you." The operation went quickly and without complications. 2 hours later, Leo woke up in his room. His consciousness was still hazy, but he could hear someone talking not far from him. "Leo, the jokes are over. You were saved this time, but the next ones might not make it. Leo's in the room with you now. As soon as he feels better, I'll be sure to ask him to send you for treatment." "What are you talking about? I'm not an alcoholic. I'm a free man." At the same second, there was a slap, and a man's voice said, "Oh, I'm Leo. I'm telling you quite seriously." Leo grinned to himself. Wow, they're already scaring grown men with it. When breathing became easier, and he could even get out of bed, Leo called his old friend. "I have a case. Remember that medical supply wagon that was ambushed? A man from that convoy operated on me yesterday. I realize that the case is long closed, but I remember you talking about wanting to dig privately." The police chief listened for about 5 minutes, then nodded his head. "It's a deal. Call me to meet you." Jacob first wanted to run home, but then realized that you cannot come empty-handed to his grandson, or his daughter either. This is all so unusual. Grandson, daughter. Even the language. Even his brain was cautiously saying these words, as if afraid that everything would turn out to be untrue. He drove to the largest mall in the city. Jacob quietly opened the door of the house. Who knows, maybe Zach is asleep. But no, Zach was not only awake. He seemed to be waiting for him, because he immediately rushed over to him. Jacob threw all the bags on the floor and picked up his grandson, who clung to him trustingly. Molly looked around at the purchases. "Oh, did you guys clean out the store? Let's make a deal. No kick out. I realize it's hard for you to call me Dad right away, but I hope that moment will come someday." Molly nodded her head in embarrassment. "I'll try." Jacob set Zach on the floor and commanded, "Let's take it apart. I hope I got the dimensions right." Molly shook her head. "Dinner first. Everything else later." Zach had eaten everything the fastest and was now looking longingly at the brightly colored box that peeked out from the pile of bags. There was obviously something very interesting in there, and obviously for him. Molly smiled as she looked at her son. She understood what he was going through. "Thank you, Molly. I can't remember the last time I had anything other than sandwiches and wheat when I got home from work." "Well, now it's on." Jacob sat on the couch and watched Zach's already calm demeanor. The big machine. The kid's eyes were burning. He hadn't parted with it all evening and then into bed. Molly had barely taken the machine out of his hands when he was already asleep. Jacob was drinking coffee, waiting for his daughter. They had so much to discuss. Molly had just entered the room when there was a knock on the door. Jacob wondered what it was like to be brought in at this hour. He usually got a call from the hospital. Standing on the doorstep was a grim Sam Jones. Molly immediately frowned. Why did he come to apologize? "You fool, she told me everything. She's crying to me. She's afraid that she'll go to jail, but she won't." Molly turned away, signaling that the conversation was over. But Sam wasn't going to leave. He sat down on a chair and spoke. "I don't know how I'm going to live my life, and my jealousy. I would have left a long time ago, but this way she'll take it out on the kids." Molly turned to him. "Is it your fault she's so jealous of you?" Sam raised his head at her. "But I didn't do anything wrong." "Yes, you did. You just don't notice it. But she does, and she sees that you're worse off at home than you are at work. Think about what I said if you want to keep your family together." Sam sat for another 5 minutes, then got up, put a thick wad of money on the table. "Molly, no offense to you. I realize you can't buy a house with this money, but you're all out of stuff." Sam left, and Jacob looked at his daughter in surprise. "And I don't understand everything now. Did he set your house on fire?" "No. His wife is our village gossip. So we should go to the police." "No need to go to the police. She's already punished herself. It's not her fault. She's just stupid and listens to nonsense." Jacob shook his head. "You are just like your mother, always for justice, for good justice. Tell me how you ended up in the village. It's a long story of a lifetime." Molly poured herself some tea and sat down in front of her father. They talked half the night. Jacob was indignant several times and said he should be nailed. First it was William, and then Martin. Looking at his watch, Jacob said 2 hours and go to bed. "I'll stay up a little longer." He went outside, breathing in more air. If things hadn't worked out this way then and now, things would be different. Leo, having learned what problems Jacob has in the family, immediately said, "Today, go to the office. They will take care of your documents. I'll call. Everything will be done quickly, in a week." Molly looked at the new passport with a smile. "Well, it's a thing to celebrate. I have to work tomorrow. I'm out of vacation time." Molly began to set the table. But then there was a knock at the door. "Yes, come in." On the doorstep stood a strange man a little older than Jacob. There was something about the man's gaze that was so forgotten yet familiar. "Good evening. I'm sorry to bother you. I'm a friend of Leo's. I very much like to talk to you, Jacob." "Well, come in." "No, if you don't mind, let's go for a walk. Your daughter doesn't need to hear our conversation." Jacob looked at Molly confused, but put on his jacket. They got out and walked to the river. "The thing is, the guy who was taken prisoner is a very good friend of mine. You know, there were so many investigations, but nobody dug up anything. I'm retired from the force, but now I'm in private practice, and I can afford to get back into the business when Jacob came back." Molly looked at him questioningly. "He only said that. It's about our service. And William, he was there too, wasn't he? But to be honest, I was hurt right away. I was treated by a shaman for a long time, so I don't really know anything. And I don't want to. I'm gonna have to go back to those times again. I feel it." The next day, Molly and Zach went to the local store. As luck would have it, Lucy was in the store at the time. Zach, as soon as he saw her, clung to his mother. And Lucy, who was just about to leave, dropped her bag on the floor. "Oh, who's come to the store? Not like for food. What about frogs, whose legs and all?" She laughed at her own joke. Molly let go of her son's hand and moved in on her. "Why do you have so much venom in you? Don't you realize you're poisoning yourself with it? Julia's been spilling all kinds of shit. And now she's going to jail. And if we were asleep, what sin would be on your soul?" Lucy retreated fearfully. "What are you waiting for?" "That I didn't do anything. In fact, I can say what I want to say, and who to believe and what to do is everyone's business." Lucy picked up her bag and headed for the door. Molly just said, "Are you watching what you say? You're sick with anger and venom." Lucy jumped outside, and already from there her threats and curses were heard. Molly smiled sweetly and turned to the saleswoman. Now Molly felt neither fear nor loneliness. She directly physically felt that she had protection behind her. Her father. The clerk looked at Molly fearfully. Their store was on the outskirts of town. You could say it was the end of the town, so everyone knew each other. She'd heard about Molly, too. That evening, her father said to Molly, "I need to go to my hometown. Would you like to buy something?" Molly thought it would be a good idea to go out. Zach had prepared for the trip extensively. Molly and Jacob almost died laughing. "When you saw the backpack he packed, no, Zach, that's no good. We can't take that much stuff for him. Zach's right behind the sniffles. But I need all this stuff." Jacob sat down in front of him. "Well, then we won't be able to buy you anything, because we'll have nowhere to put it." The boy thought for a moment, then quickly began to free his backpack. At the train station, they were met by the same man who had once come to them. "Jacob, I will say at once that your story helped me a lot. Some facts became a real missing link. Unfortunately, a friend of mine was killed when he was captured and ransomed. He escaped, but he died in the escape. Now we know who it was that set the enemies upon your wagon." Jacob stretched thoughtfully. "So I thought they were waiting for us there for a reason." "No, not for nothing. This is a man you know well." And Jacob stared at the man in surprise. "You are. This is your boyhood friend, William Edwards." "No, it can't be." "Yes, he's not a very nice man, but what would it be?" "There was a lot of money at stake. Jacob, I realize that now the puzzle is finally coming together. And if it was William, then everything was falling into place." An hour later, they were leaving the investigative committee, where Jacob and William had a confrontation. William was crying tears, apologizing to Jacob and Molly. The man caught up with them on the street, handed Molly the keys. "Take these keys to the apartment. Are you still registered there? He won't need them for the next 10 years. They were silent for a while. Then Jacob decisively said, let's go to a cafe or a restaurant. We should celebrate. They sat down at a table by the window. Molly smiled because Zach was asking 1,000 questions. Why here? As in a fairy tale. Molly. The young woman flinched, looked up, and saw Martin. Zach immediately felt his mother tense up, pressed himself against her and froze, looking at the stranger. Martin looked at his wife with surprise. Of course, the formerly beloved wife. Strange, had she then exchanged him for this man who was old enough to be her father? And this child, judging by its age, she'd gotten pregnant as soon as she'd run away from him. Martin was still grateful to his mother for being able to open his eyes. True, he hadn't married again yet, despite his mother's best efforts. Hello, Martin. She wanted to hide so she wouldn't see the traitor's face. She didn't know or understand how she felt about this man, but she knew she didn't want to see him. How are you doing, Molly? Martin looked mockingly at Jacob. I guess that's what happiness is to you. I am happy, Martin. I hope you're not suffering in your happy life, too. What kind of hypocrites are you? I believed you were pure, that you love me. Molly raised her eyebrows in surprise. Then she stood up. You're the one calling me, you hypocrite. You've gone off to have fun. You couldn't even tell me yourself that you were fed up with me and asked your mother to kick me out. And then you call me a hypocrite. Martin even took a step back under Molly's pressure. Kicked you out where? What are you talking about? You just decided to justify yourself. She turned around and sat back down. Martin wanted to say something else, but Jacob stood in front of him, a young man. Would you please leave us? My daughter doesn't want to talk to you, and my grandson is afraid of you. Martin cast one last glance at Lisa and quickly moved toward the exit. Now he wanted to get to his mother and ask some questions. Molly was silent for a long time, then raised her eyes to Jacob. He asked, I take it that this is Zach's father. Yes, Dad. I've seen his face somewhere, but I can't remember. He's a biochemist. He seems pretty good. Maybe even accomplished something. Jacob slapped himself on the forehead. That's right. I read his article. I thought he was very knowledgeable. Meanwhile, Martin was carrying everything back to his mother after Molly left him. He came back and moved out on Mom. True, she was adamantly opposed to it, but that didn't bother him much. He'd rather have her bothering him about nothing. But it was unbearable to live with her. Mom. Lisa came out of the room. Martin, why are you screaming like a victim? Mom, we need to talk. What we need to talk about. What could be so important? That you went to visit your mother and saw Molly. The woman shuddered, then quite indifferently said, I'm glad, and I had nothing to do with it. Mother, tell me how Molly left me. And who she left with. Lisa jerked her shoulder. God, I've got nothing better to do. Only how to keep in your head such nonsense will you run. Martin stood in front of his mother. Mom, the jokes are over. I saw Molly, I saw her son, who could be my age. She doesn't have a wedding ring, she doesn't look like a walking woman. Which makes me think you have something to tell me. Lisa. Somehow she looked at her son at once. She had never seen him in such a state. Jacob and his family returned home in the late afternoon. The day had been so full that Zach had long since fallen asleep in his grandfather's arms. Molly, you go to bed. I'm on duty tomorrow too. Yes, Dad, you go. I'll do all the work here myself. Molly looked at the shopping pile. Zach's grandfather's budget had been shaken up pretty badly today. He didn't ask for anything, by the way, just stared with huge eyes at anything. And Grandpa's already running out to buy it. It's time to go back to work at the daycare center. There was a quiet knock on the window. Molly looked out and saw Julia, the same one who had set her house on fire. Sighing, she threw on her sweater and went outside. Julia immediately threw herself at her feet. Molly, I'm so sorry. I don't know how it all happened, as if someone was pushing me. I've done something that I don't know how to live. Sam is embarrassing to look at in front of the kids. Calm down, you're rereading. No one died at the funeral. And that's already good. Julia sat down on the step. How to live? How to live now? Molly sat down next to her, usually to live. Forget everything that happened and start over. Start how? Yeah, Sam won't forgive me. And neither will you. I forgave you a long time ago. I'm grateful in some ways. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have found my father." Julia looked at her in amazement. "The new surgeon is your father?" Yes, Molly was well aware that tomorrow the whole small town would know about it. But she decided to go with it. They'd find out sooner or later anyway, so let it be sooner so there would be less gossip. Molly turned around. Sam was standing at the door. Julia jumped up. "Sam, what are you doing here?" He looked at his wife gloomily. "What are you doing here?" "I came to apologize." Sam's voice softened a little. He came in, sat down on the porch. "I bought a trip to the sea. In 3 days, we'll go as a family." Julia froze. Molly smiled. She had underestimated Sam. He appeared to have heard her. Sam at sea altogether. They walked tightly holding hands. Molly sat still for a long time, looking up at the sky and smiling. 3 days later, the village was shaken by the news Leo Alkex failed Schlegel. While in the hospital, there was nothing to do. Asked his wife to bring from home something he had left from art, and all days long he painted. When the picture was ready, it was seen by one of the patients, who immediately offered Leo to write more paintings for a real exhibition. Leo, telling everyone, said that he no longer drank because great things awaited him. "Jacob, you have a visitor. Is the visitor not a patient?" "No, he doesn't look like a patient. But let him come into the office." Martin came in. He didn't look as great as he did in the cafe. Jacob immediately pressed his lips together, stood up, then obliged. Martin looked at him. "And I came to you for help." "I really need your help. What makes you think I'm going to help you?" "Because I don't know why. Maybe because you broke up with Molly's mother for some reason." "Jacob, I don't know why the exchange of belligerent fervor went away. Have a seat now that you're here. I'm listening to Martin." I couldn't start for a long time. Then he started talking. He spoke without any emotion, just laying out one by one the facts he had learned from his mother. By the end of the story, Jacob understood perfectly well that in front of him sat the same victim of deception as he himself had once become. "Martin, even if I agree to help you, there is no guarantee that Molly will forgive you. You realize she's out on the street with no money, no place to live, pregnant." Martin looked up at Jacob. "I mean, I'm right, Zach. My son is yours, of course. Who else would it be? Help me. Just one thing. I need Molly to listen to me." Molly stuffed and dialed the windows. The door slammed and she turned around and froze. It was her father, and behind him stood Martin. What the hell? What was he doing here? Jacob raised his hand. "Molly, we haven't been in contact with you that long, of course. But you know I don't want to hurt you. I'm just asking you to listen to Martin. Then, after you've listened, you can chase him away, even beat him up. Do you think he has something interesting to say, another incredible story to tell? Or are moms more inclined to tell stories?" Martin sullenly remained silent. Then Molly looked at her watch. "You have exactly 10 minutes, and that's only because Daddy asked." Jacob stepped out so he wouldn't interrupt the conversation. He was sure that Molly still loved that loner. Except her pride. Half an hour had passed. The house was quiet, and Jacob decided to return. He opened the door and froze. Molly and Martin were standing in the middle of the room, hugging, when they both heard Jacob. Then from Zero and from each other. Jacob laughed. "I see our family is getting bigger and bigger." Molly smiled embarrassedly at Dad. "What a fool I was." It turns out that Martin is shaking his head stubbornly. "No, the biggest fool in this situation is me." Jacob didn't have time to answer anything because his phone rang. It was Andrew. "Jacob, how are you?" "Yeah, I'm fine." Why the mysterious voice? Are they packing their bags? Peter has been dishonorably banished. Is your rightful place waiting for you? Jacob exhaled, "That's news, but no muse." "But you're an excellent surgeon and neighborhood hospitals are not enough for your scale." Jacob hung up the phone, confused, turned to Molly. "Here is back, Molly," smiled and hugged him. "Daddy, it's good your place in a real hospital. Especially since we've decided to go back too." Jacob raised an eyebrow. "Duck, I guess you two should get married." Martin and Molly laughed. "Papa, neither of us ever bothered to get a divorce." Many people came to see off the surgeon and Martin and Zach. Even Lucy came, though she didn't come close to everyone. She stood aside. Colleagues arranged Jacob's fancy send-off, and today he even has a little headache. Molly saw what was sneaking up on her. Julia is tanned and beautiful. Molly, can I give you a hug? I never realized what an attentive and loving husband I have. Thank you. A car stopped at the gate, and no one got out for a long time. Martin looked at it anxiously. Finally, the door opened and Lisa came into the light. Martin jerked toward her, but Molly held him back. The woman didn't look her best. She leaned against the car and stood like that. Molly approached her. Are you all right? Lisa looked at her and cried. Can you forgive me for being such a fool? When I found out I had a grandson, it turned me upside down. I can't eat. I can't sleep. Molly stared into Lisa's eyes for a long time, trying to find a single drop of deceit, but she couldn't. She smiled afterward. I guess I'll have to forgive you. We're family. Anyone can make a mistake. Martin breathed a sigh of relief. No matter what his mom had done, she was still his mom. And he couldn't turn his back on her anyway. And it would be very hard to choose between Molly and his mom. Martin picked Zach up in his arms and said, Shall we go meet Grandma? Zach's eyes rounded in surprise. And then there are relatives. There are so many. Martin laughed. It happens. And we're also hoping that Mommy will give you a brother or sister. As soon as possible.